Chapter 120, Mercenary 4. Yi Yanwu narrowed his eyes at Fant. Fant just whistled and looked away. Yi Yanwu clicked his tongue internally and turned to look at where the mercenaries were. What do you want to say? A question filled with annoyance. The mercenaries' faces fell. They tried to look as intimidating as possible. You look like someone, and that person owes us a lot. So I want to ask who you are. If we could exchange names. He twisted his words, but it was clear he wanted to know Yi Yanwu's identity. Yi Yanwu didn't want to deal with them any longer. He crossed his arms and icily replied. And if I'm who you think I am? What? The hoarder, it's me. This bastard. The mercenaries all glowered and ran at Yi Yanwu. The building that wasn't all the big quickly became chaotic. Yi Yanwu didn't move and called for Fant. Fant, what's up? Get rid of them. Why should I do your business? Because it's irksome. No, should I do it? Your personality is really. Fant muttered under his breath and stepped forward. But when he got ready to fight, a sinister smile spread on his face. Well, I was bored so it's fine. Bang, Fant ran to the front like he found a fun toy. And he waved his fists around. It was the Cheongram family's writing of divination, the Thunder Regime. A large explosion filled the air. And right as he was about to sweep them all away. But don't kill anyone, tisk. Fant stopped and tsked his tongue at Yi Yanwu's advice. Thankfully, the energy building up decreased, but it was still enough to be effectful. Quang, quaquang, Fant broke everything in his reach. If a weapon flew at him, he broke it with his bare hands. If a body flew at him, he flicked it away using his elbow, and if magic flew at him, he completely got rid of it using thunderbolts. ACKKK. What the hell is this? He destroyed, crushed, and broke. Everyone who ran at him ended up with their legs or arms folded back. The floor was covered with their blood, and the air was filled with dust. My arm, leg, my leg, OWW. In the midst of all the screams, Fant freely moved around like he was in his comfort zone. Chirp chirpy, master, I don't like that guy. Chirpy continued to tweet on Yi Yanwu's shoulder like he was having fun. He laughed with his wings spread apart. Yi Yanwu was about to tell Chirpy, who wasn't old enough to know what was right or wrong, that he shouldn't turn out like Fant, but he suddenly felt a presence behind his back. One of them who had been hiding their presence at that time ran at Yi Yanwu with their sword waved. Yi Yanwu didn't even lift a finger. Instead, Chirpy screamed in the direction the guy was coming from. Go away. Boom. A blue flame erupted from him along with a rough storm. The flame-covered mercenary was thrown back outside the building and crashed outside the walls. Ah, you're so annoying. Chirpy crossed his wings and snorted. His puffed-up chest was cute. Adora looked at Chirpy with surprised eyes. She knew he had the power of the legendary beasts, but she didn't know it was this strong. Yi Yanwu looked inside again. The fight was already over. No, he couldn't call this one-sided violence a fight, but it was over. About 50 players with broken legs and arms were groaning on the floor. The rest of the 200 or so players were looking at Fant with fearful eyes. Shit, I only got dust on my hands. Fant lightly brushed off his hands. Like it was nothing, and he turned to look at the trembling players. They weren't able to meet his gaze and looked away. Their will to fight was completely crushed. However, Fant wasn't done. An eyebrow twitched. What, you're still standing? Aren't you beating your heads? They looked at each other and hesitated. But as Fant brought up his thunder energy again, they started to stick their heads on the floor. Aren't you doing it too? The injured players weren't excluded. Rather, he was tougher on them because they had tried to rebel not knowing their places. Unless their necks were broken, there weren't any exceptions. The fierce aura like that of a wolf pack had completely dissipated. Fant now grinned as if he felt better. Why there were so many humans that wanted to be beat up, he didn't know. But Adora had a slightly worried face. That burn. These were all people that would become Yi Yanwu's hands and feet. It was okay to intimidate them, but they were useless if they couldn't be used. She thought she should get some potions, at the very least, from the medical center. But Yi Yanwu lightly shook his hand in the air. A blue fire as big as a person's head appeared. It was holy fire. Adora didn't know what Yi Yanwu was going to do. Then, Yi Yanwu lightly flicked his holy fire on his forefinger. Then, the holy fire split into tens and flew towards the injured people. What? They flinched at the sudden fire coming at them, but they were surprised at the warmth that entered their bodies. Their ripped wounds healed. Dislocated bones moved back in their positions, and the horrifying pain completely disappeared. It didn't perfectly fix everyone, but the fast rate that it healed was quite surprising. Wasn't this like the cure or recovery they had heard of? But those kinds of healing magic powers were only able to be received from famous expensive apostles or priests. The mercenaries saw Yi and Wu in a new light. Fant and Adora widened their eyes as well. But Yi and Wu, who used the purification feature of his holy fire, couldn't care less. He just apathetically gave new orders. Fant, yes. Yi and Wu pointed his chin at the mercenaries whose heads were planted on the ground. Don't miss a single one and break more of those bastards. Devil no, he's worse than that. That guy isn't even human. Not at all. Shit, healing us and breaking us, healing and breaking. How is that human? The mercenaries felt wronged. They wanted to cry, but they couldn't. They couldn't even groan in pain. They experienced what hell was for a few hours. The ones who rebelled, and even the ones who stood back and watched the situation. The mercenaries in Team 2 had to experience their bones breaking and attaching again several times. Yi and Wu didn't listen to their pleas. He just quietly looked on, like this was obvious. He repeated the process of fixing them after Fant broke them again and again. After a while, the mercenaries completely lost it. But the holy fire brought back their consciousness as well. They had no way to escape. In the end, the ones that had rebellious looks in there until the very last moment quickly gave up. They put their tails in between their legs. Now, they were too scared to even look Yi and Wu in the eye. I'll say one thing, I only need a good hunting dog, I don't need a crazy dog that bites its owner. This is your last chance. Quote. The 250 mercenaries shut their mouths. They all had goosebumps from the cold air. And they realized how the alliance of the clans was destroyed. Hundreds of players had tried to get the hoarder, but they were all trapped in a foggy forest, never to return. Some even said the bar where the information was leaked was pulled out by its roots. The only reason why the hoarder kept them alive was because they were useful. But he warned that if they did anything weird again, he would kick them out without hesitation. Even if they were a part of Red Dragon, he wouldn't let it go. Also, Yi and Wu definitely had the skills and mind to do that. Gulp. The mercenaries swallowed. They continued looking at the ground because they didn't want to meet Yi and Wu's gaze. Now there won't be any more annoying events. Yi and Wu was sure that the mercenaries would become his faithful dogs in the future. They were useful guys. Alive, they were good hunting dogs. Dead, they would be healthy souls. The mercenaries couldn't help and continued staring at the ground like they read Yi and Wu's thoughts. Yi and Wu got up and left the rest to Fant. Fant complained, like he didn't understand why he had to do these things outside of the tribe, but it didn't work on Yi and Wu. One word from him was enough. Go back to your tribe if you don't want to. Damn, I'll do it, geez, seriously, you are so. Fant shouted like he was sick of him. And he snapped his head back at the mercenaries who were healed. He thought he would need to let go of some of his anger. The mercenaries turned pale. Brother Fant is working hard even here. It's his fate. Adora turned back to where she could hear Fante's despair and chuckled. To a guy that had come with them because he was sick of dealing with the tribe's business was doing it here. But her brother's pain was her delight. The smile didn't leave her face. Yi and Wu laughed looking at Adora. And he suddenly thought of the blue-haired woman he saw in the strategy room. A calm-looking woman who had a strong power. It was familiar to him. Power of the draconic species. There were only 3 people in the tower who had their power. One of them was Jung Woo, but he died, and another was the half-human half-dragon, but it had been a while since they disappeared. And the other was in Red Dragon. That woman, Summer Queen. Yi and Wu's eyes sunk. The clan leader of Red Dragon had appeared, is that it? Did you pick up an okay kid? After everyone left the strategy room, the woman with blue hair, the Summer Queen exuberantly smiled. Bahal bowed his head with one knee on the floor. I didn't even imagine that child would bring such precious information with him. The Summer Queen twirled her hair around a finger and hummed. Raoul had just reported that the Chionwado's presence was felt at the marked territories. It meant the map wasn't wrong. And so their forces moved. Each of them took charge of one location, and led more forces there. A new revolution had probably begun around now. Chionwado was probably plenty surprised at this sudden attack. Attention, you seem to have a lot of it. For that child? Yes. Bahal carefully nodded his head, and the Summer Queen couldn't help but smirk. Of course, he's the third one of that geezer. Who wouldn't be interested? There was only one person the Summer Queen would call geezer. And that was the Martial King. So keep him well reined in. It'll be fun. He definitely seems to have some plan as well. I'll stay aware. Bahal bowed. Actually, Yin Wu's present was completely unexpected for him as well. He was first interested because he was an acquaintance of his teacher, Heneva, but he had become angry after hearing he joined forces with the One-Horn tribe, and in turn, Cheongwado. But his anger melted like snow. He was more interesting the more you looked at him. In many ways. Also, Leonte, he's still stuck outside. The sword god is protecting him, so it'll take a little longer. Leonte wasn't aware, but the only reason why he could escape was because Bahal let him. To lead him to where the stone was. He had even stuck a tracking device on him. But Leonte didn't move towards where the stone was. He was staying in the same location. So annoying. Obviously, he's researching more about the stone, right? We are presuming that's the case. As you know, the Saber God recently got rid of the 4 legendary beasts, and some people think it's because of the stone's research. But he's probably not going to pull out the stone until it's finished. So we decided to throw some bait. Bait? At her question, Bahal revealed his plans. After explaining everything, the Summer Queen laughed. She licked her red lips with her tongue seductively. Adorable. I think it'll be fine. Thank you. As a reward, I'll let you lick my feet. How's that? It's an honor. The Summer Queen held out a foot. Bahal had a delighted expression and slowly took off her heels. When he put his face near her foot, the scent of a rose filled his nose. The Summer Queen let go of her hair that she was twirling when she looked at Bahal. Instead, she just ruffled her hair. Her hair was normally a fiery red, but right now it was a mild blue. This hair was her symbol, and the origin of her magic power. She needed to find her original color soon. Heaven Wing, that son of a bitch. She was dealing with the humiliation of coming down to the lower floors because of a dead person. However, it wouldn't be too long anymore. Okay, so quickly find it for me. That stone, even if it's incomplete, it's okay. The Summer Queen's gaze sunk. Only with that, I'll be able to restore my dragon heart. Chapter 121, Mercenary 5. Bang, just what is the meaning of this Hyungnim? The spear god flank roughly opened the door where the Martial King was staying. He felt his anger bubbling to the surface after hearing that Yin Wu, Fant, and Adora had gone over to the Red Dragon. And they must have taken secret information of Cheongwado with them, because they were suffering from Red Dragon's attacks. Because they were children he had raised like his disciples. He couldn't help but become angry. Everyone who had been inside turned to look at him. They were all faces the spear god knew. Elders. The Martial King treated them like they were old geezers mooching off of the tribe, but they were actually largely respected by the tribe members. Flance, what are you doing? Even if we're brothers, no, because we're brothers, you should be more respectful. This is an official conference. Behave appropriately. Then, an elder giving off an impression of a scholar lifted his head. Head elder. The spear god didn't particularly feel comfortable around him since he was one. No, everyone felt uncomfortable around his strict personality except for the Martial King. His Mugong was known to rival the Martial King's, so the spear god felt intimidated. No, since with this contract, you've completely let go of all authority for the royal tribe. You have to be treated as the spear god of Cheongwado. Spear god, please be respectful. The spear god bit his lower lip. He had forgotten about his position because he was blind from anger. The reason why the One-Horn tribe participated in the tower's business was because of the pledge the spear god had made with them. The pledge of the horn. The pledge to let go of his horn. The One-Horn tribe had a lot of pride for the god they served. They were able to achieve what they achieved because of this god, and with the vision of Mugong, they were able to have the reputation they did. Because of this, the direct royal descendants of their guardian god were extremely respected. Of course, they didn't focus on their statuses within the tribe, but there was still an underlying respect. And so the family had a lot of responsibilities. The same went for the spear god. He didn't have to do as much because the Martial King became king, but his place as the Martial King's blood-related brother was safe and set in stone. However, he said that he would throw away all benefits of being a part of the royal family and not fight in the name of the One-Horn tribe. That was the pledge of the horn. Since the tribe was receiving the horn of the royal family, they needed to pay for its price. This was the reason why the tribe joined Cheongwado's side. But even with that kind of pledge in place, the fact that they were forced into the war didn't change. The tribe didn't look too nicely at the spear god. Also, because he was one that left the tribe for another group. The head elder was one of these people who didn't like him. The spear god took a big breath to calm himself down. The martial king was staring at him with a smile, but didn't say anything. The spear god realized the martial king wasn't going to help him. A memory from the past came to his mind. Before they were brothers, he was the person that he respected the most in the entire world, but he always felt far from him. He never showed his real thoughts. So he established Cheongwado with the sword god who appeased him. He didn't regret that decision even today. That was why the spear god was able to organize his thoughts so quickly. Sorry I interrupted your conference. Then, as Cheongwado's spear god, as the person in charge, I have something to ask the martial king. His voice cracked at the end. The events that occurred on this stage, the hoarder, Fant, and Adora's conversion. Was the martial king aware of this? The martial king laughed as if he was amused. Well, of course, it would be bad if I didn't know what my children and disciple were up to. The spear god clenched his fists. His veins popped out. But how could you just watch? Because I wanted to. I said, because I wanted to. Quote. Exclamation mark quote. The spear god felt like screaming. But he knew, no matter how much he complained, it wouldn't work on this brother. Rather, he would try to do something through this opportunity. The martial king opened his eyes even wider as if he was proud that the spear god was holding back his anger. His brother had matured over the years. What I do with my disciple and children is up to me. It's unfortunate it affected Cheongwado, but it's something we should take care of, not something for you to fix. Quote. Also, our tribe doesn't interfere in individuals' choices. Each person is responsible for their own actions, the tribe doesn't need to be responsible. The spear god was silent for a moment. The martial king was saying that this was no different than when he left the tribe with the sword god. But there was also another meaning behind his words. The spear god narrowed his eyes. Quote. So that means, if we meet the children during the war, we can kill them. As I said, each person is responsible for their actions. We don't interfere with that. I'll trust that you don't take back what you just said. The spear god glared at his brother and turned to leave. Bang! The building slightly shook at the strength of the door closing. The martial king grinned. Well, I thought he had matured. But no one can do anything about that temper of his. The elders were silent. The head elder adjusted his glasses and asked the martial king. So aside from flank, tribe leader, are you really planning on leaving Cain, Fant, and Adora alone? After Jang was pathetically destroyed, Fant was showing potential as the next king. He had also shown a lot of growth with the raid of Kurum. But it was worrisome that he had gone over to the enemies. But the martial king was the same as ever. The rule doesn't change, old man. The head elder narrowed his eyes at the martial king and he chuckled. Becoming a vessel for a king after more struggles. That's how you're viewing the situation. The martial king just smiled mysteriously. But the head elder was satisfied, since he could tell how the martial king was feeling even without words. All right, as you wish, we won't speak about this any longer. And moving on to the next item on the agenda. It's about Their conference continued. To the left, 1 step. To the right, sword, turn again. The mercenaries moved according to a cross-armed Fant. Seeing the 250 of them move as one was a sight to behold. Even the other mercenaries paused to look. Mercenaries were beings that moved as they preferred. Even if they were trapped in the frame of the Foreign Legion, they still seeked some freedom. But in the span of days, they had changed completely. Their eyes were sharper. But Fant frowned like he didn't like something. Aren't you gonna do it properly? Do you want to roll again? In formation again. Strike. Ack. The scared mercenaries shouted. A strong force could be felt from their weapons that they thrusted. And, in a place that could see everything, Yianwu and Adora were sitting together. However, only Adora was watching the training. Yianwu was quietly reading a book. They've somewhat improved even if it's only been 3 days. Yianwu raised his head from his book at what Adora said. He used draconic eyes to look at Fant training team 2 and nodded his head. Definitely, they've become useful. What Fant was teaching the soldiers was a modified version of the 8 battle formations that the tribe used to teach lower warriors called sword formation. Sword formation was a type of jinbup that thought strategies like defense and offense. It was able to be learned quickly. It was especially useful in a battle where various events happened. So he had specially requested Fan to teach it to Team 2. But it was much more effective than he expected. That guy, he has the ability to teach people effectively without that dirty temper. No, it's the skill to lead people. He realized why Fant was a candidate for king. At first, he didn't know how such a simple and violent person could be the king of a tribe. But he owned strong attributes that outshone those weaknesses. Leadership and charisma. Yin Wu had led a legion in Africa, so he knew talent when he saw it. It wasn't something easily taught. It was something Fant owned because he was born with confidence and pride as the martial king's son and studied rules and tasks of the royal family. Since one had to be sure of themselves to lead others. I can relax and just leave it to him from now. He thought he would be able to hand over all his authority of Team 2 to Fant during his stay with Red Dragon. Although Fant would throw another tantrum if he found out. Of course, he was planning on kicking him back to Kurum if he rejected. Yin Wu continued watching their training for a while, and looked down at his book again. Adora approached him. But what are you looking at since earlier? The second section of the 8 Extreme Fists. Adora's eyes widened. She knew he completely memorized the first section, but she couldn't have imagined he received the second and last sections from the Martial King. That was how much the Martial King trusted him. Adora felt proud for some reason. Is that so? But I guess the second section is hard for even you. Since 4 days have passed but you're still peering at it. Adora slightly laughed at Yin Wu's human side. The 8 Extreme Fists was one of the most superior mugongs the Martial King made. It became harder as it went to learn it, and a considerable amount of time was needed for it. It took several years to just understand it. A few of the elders breathed the 8 Extreme Fists day and night, but they still didn't understand it. That seemed to be Yin Wu's case as well. He had shown rapid growth, but he had only begun Mugong. It was obvious it would take time. On the other hand, Adora was happy she could help with something. She already knew all of the 8 Extreme Fists and she could freely help Yin Wu since the Martial King hadn't said she couldn't help. She thought she could stay by his side to help him. Just the two of them. Cozily. However, no, I memorized the form, and I'm learning the steps little by little. But I'm just trying to see if I understood it right. Checking if I didn't miss anything. Quote. Adora was shocked that her thoughts were completely wrong. Now, Yin Wu seemed like a monster. He finished memorizing that. The second and last sections of the 8 Extreme Fists were made up of 32 and 16 steps, respectively, and it became even more difficult as it went. But he had memorized it in 4 days. Adora remembered that Yin Wu had made a Mugong just like that in 4 days recently. She still couldn't get used to this. Fant is gonna pull his hair out again. Adora shook her head imagining Fant. But there was something she was missing. Yin Wu wasn't memorizing 8 Extreme Fists, but incorporating into his Heaven Wing mana control. 8 Extreme Fists and incredible as it is. But to use it with my magic circuit, a little adjustment is needed. This was only possible with the understanding of the 8 Extreme Fists, so it was surprising. But it was just something obvious to Yin Wu. He was receiving the help of the trait, Dragon's Knowledge, and fixing it according to the flaws he saw with his draconic eyes. But it was still a great feat that couldn't be accomplished without motivation and tenacity. So Yin Wu was frequently seeing the same messages these days. The gods and demons of the 98th floor are observing you with interest. A few gods and demons are discussing you with amusement. Hermes is looking at you proudly. The fact that the gods and demons of the 98th floor were observing me. There was even a familiar name. Hermes. He thought of Hermes, who he had met in the treasury, and shook his head. At first, the attention was cool, but now it was annoying. Making the 8 Extreme Fists was even more important now. So as he was about to focus on his book. Oh, you seem to be getting on fine. Yin Wu folded his book at someone's presence, and turned his head in that direction. It was familiar. Bahal smiled satisfactorily at Yin Wu and the training of Team 2. Everyone was flustered at the Supreme Commander's sudden appearance. The mercenaries stood up straighter, and the team leaders quickly rushed over to greet him. But Bahal waved his hand as if saying it was unnecessary, and turned back to look at Yin Wu. I heard you had a tight grasp on the mercenaries. You seem to be fitting in well. Thank you. Sure. How is it? Do you think you can jump in now? Yin Wu's eyes flashed in understanding. It was the order to start moving now that he had gotten the legion under his control. That means it's time to start. It was time to continue with his plan. Yin Wu nodded his head without a trace of his thoughts on his face. We can move anytime. Good. Then there's a place you secretly. Before that, I actually have something to say. Instead of getting mad at Yi and Wu who dared to cut him off, Bahal showed curiosity. Yi and Wu was a lucky charm that brought interesting things his way. He was curious what he was going to pull out this time. What is it? Yi and Wu slowly opened his mouth. Did you know the Saber God's son was staying on the 16th floor? Exclamation mark quote. Bahal's eyes became bigger. Chapter 122, Mission 2. The Saber God has a child. At the unexpected words, Bahal fell silent, and slowly opened his mouth. His narrowed expression showed suspicion. It was completely unknown that the Saber God had a family. The Saber God lived and breathed the sword. With the 9 swords he lugged around in that iron box, he was known for requesting to fight with famous players. He was focused on becoming stronger. Also, he was well known for not becoming close to women during his entire life. But he had a child. Did you know that the Saber God has been struggling these days because of the lack of his magic power? Only a few players in high positions knew that he couldn't last long in a fight. He began to use 7 swords instead of 9, and his clean fight became more of a bloody battle. Other clans were guessing that his body had been ruined from some kind of magical explosion. And that's related to his child. Yes. Yi and Wu nodded his head and continued. The Saber God's child was born with difficulty. Difficulty? Yes. They say his body is weak because he was born after only 8 months. But the Saber God would have gotten some elixir or ambrosia. The body cannot stack up magic power. Tisk, how unfortunate. If it was a normal environment, it might have been okay, but in the tower, that was a disability. It wasn't something that could be treated even with the newest medicine. And his health isn't that well, so he almost died a few times. Also, since the Saber God has a lot of enemies, he would have had to somehow hide him. And heal him at the same time. Ha-het. Bahal slapped his knees in laughter like the rest of the story was obvious. If rumors of the Saber God's sick son spread, players would gather to hunt him like wolves. So that place that the Saber God had chosen was the 16th floor. The 16th floor had the temple of the platform 3 goddesses. TN, name may change as we get more information in the future. 3 goddesses that had to stay in place because they couldn't walk, despite having legs. But they were able to tell players' fates. And the temple and their apostles and priests were famous for healing. Also, it was a holy place where fighting was forbidden. So it was the best place for the Saber God to leave his son. And he's continuing to pull out magic power to heal his son's illness. Is that how I can interpret it? That's what I know. Bahal nodded. If he needed more magic power than what was normal, he couldn't use the fighting methods he normally used. And that must be the reason why the Saber God hunted the legendary beasts. He has no reason to refuse if Cheonwado lets him have the Niden and the hearts. Yi and Wu's eyes sunk, and the phoenix's Niden and heart that he swallowed. I need to get it back somehow. Yi and Wu was planning on giving it to Chirpy, and take the other legendary beasts' Niden and hearts for himself. Although the Saber God had probably already digested them. But there was still a way to get it back. Yi and Wu clenched his fists. This was actually information from the diary. When his brother had been looking for Cheonwado's weaknesses, this was something he found. But he wasn't able to share this information because of Arthea's divide at the time. Now it was different. Chirpy had to watch his mother become injured trying to save him. He was planning on sharing the same pain, the Saber God. It's definitely information that pulls my interest. But who's the source? It's information I came across when I was with the One-Horn tribe. He just said the first thing that came to his mind. It might be a trap. Or it might not. No, it's more likely that it is. Whether you meant or not. I know that I could be a Trojan horse. Bahal smiled bitterly. To say it that directly. I feel a bit sorry. But try to understand us as well. Yi and Wu had some credibility with the map he brought, but many still suspected him. If it was just a small sacrifice for the big picture, the players that gathered on the 16th floor could be in danger. And so that was why. I'll go. Yi and Wu could go himself. On your own will. Yes, I'll go with Team 2. Then even if it's a trap, Red Dragon won't be affected. Bahal nodded. Yi and Wu was an outsider, and the Foreign Legion was only a group of mercenaries that could be replaced anytime. It was a card they could throw anyway. Bahal scratched an itchy spot and couldn't help but laugh when he was looking at Yi and Wu. If that's true, you'll be able to end all the suspicion and be on the fast track to promotions. I won't say I don't want that to happen. But I guarantee that you, who led This strategy will benefit from it as well. Bahal satisfactorily nodded his head. That meant he would give all the honor to him. Instead, Yi and Wu could completely be under Bahal's umbrella now. You acted like someone who wouldn't obey anyone's orders 3 years ago. I realized that the world was a cold place during this incident. You realized well, you have to stay warm in a cold place. And from now on, you'll only have spring days to look forward to. I'll remember what you said. Yi and Wu thought while bowing. Warm spring days. He twisted his lips. I wonder, will those days come for you? Bahal didn't see his smirk under the mask. Orders fell for Team 2. A mission, already. I heard he met with Bahal. Isn't that amazing? A team leader speaking with the Supreme Commander. That means he's respected by that much, but it's also dangerous. I hope they compensate us well for dangerous missions. Mercenaries of Team 2 headed over to the gym, but they became quieter as they became closer. They could see Fant. With his arms crossed, he looked like a grim reaper, welcoming them. All 250 of them gathered. They looked like a well-organized military, surprising for a group of mercenaries. We've received a mission. Yi and Wu began to explain the mission. He revealed that it was to secretly attack a subsidiary of the Red Dragon because information about the Saber God's son couldn't be made public. The mercenaries were bewildered at the sudden orders, but no one asked any questions. The leader determined such things about the mission. The mercenaries just cleanly followed the orders. Some of them were well known for their skills. However, Yi and Wu placed emphasis on one more thing before they left for the 12th floor. I have one more thing to say. Quote. Everyone looked at Yi and Wu. Their faces were filled with questions. I haven't completed the challenges up to the 16th floor yet. Quote. So we'll be moving as we finish the challenges up to the 15th floor quickly, so keep that in mind. The mercenaries had dazed expressions. What? So, the rumors were true. Not the 30th or the 40th floor. Does that make sense? Some said Yi and Wu was a player of the 11th floor. But everyone treated it as a foolish rumor. No one believed that a player on the lower floors could beat a semi-ranker. But they were surprised to discover it was the truth. However, Yi and Wu disregarded the mercenaries, shocked faces and opened a portal by ripping a ticket. Will you ascend to the 12th floor? Then I'll be back, so wait a moment. He said a short goodbye to Fant and Adora. They were upset that they hadn't finished the challenge of the 11th floor, but they nodded their heads like it couldn't be helped. And so, Yi and Wu and Team 2 all transported to the 12th floor through a blue portal under their feet. This is the 12th floor, the coffin for wanderers. With a shining light, a large field revealed itself to Yi and Wu and Team 2. The endless horizon was flat, and no clouds could be seen. The ground was cracked like a turtle's shell, showing the desolate environment. All they could see were dried trees and small insects or centipedes that crawled through the cracks. The challenge of the 12th floor is beginning. Trial. Challenger who wished to climb the tower. You have most likely been through many difficult tasks climbing the floors. You may have experienced hesitation and sacrifice, but joy and hope must have followed. This large desert is the same. There isn't a single strand of grass growing because the water has dried up, and it has become a land of death where wanderers are filled. So cross this land of death with only your powers. If you have the strength and motivation to cross, you will be able to retain your balance in any trials you come across in the future. Sigh, to think that I would come back here. I never wanted to come back here. I'm going crazy. The mercenaries all scowled looking at the endless plains. The 11th floor was known as the most comfortable place to live. Everyone who had become used to that comfort suffered greatly upon arriving at the 12th floor. Since it's so different from the 11th floor, the 12th floor was known as an arduous place to live. Like the message, all the water had dried up and not a single strand of grass grew here. It was impossible to find water. Food as well. Chewing dried up bark or eating the insects and centipedes was a luxury. It was similar to Section F of the tutorial in many ways. But if you knew the secret of the thorn mole, it was definitely bearable, and unlike Section F, where you could quit if you wanted to, that wasn't an option on the 12th floor. You had to cross the large desert. The direction was north. The only signpost was the hot sun that was always in the sky. Also, the large desert was famous for becoming worse the further you went. Currently, the ruined land was all. But if you went further, you were met with blowing sand, painful heat waves, and even a volcano with bubbling lava. In a way, it was simple, but it was also that much difficult. So players that finished the trial on the 12th floor never came back. The same went for the mercenaries. But they had been forced to come here because of Yi and Wu. They felt like crying. However, Yi and Wu didn't waver. The heat wasn't enough to influence him. It's so warm here, really. Rather, Chirpy, who was on his shoulder, fluttered his wings in joy. After earning the title of legendary beast's successor, he owned the resistance and immunity to not even blink an eye at the most dreariest of environments. Of course, the mercenaries felt wronged, because they thought they could just join up with Yi and Wu after he finished everything on the 16th floor. Just why? Yi and Wu didn't have a reason to leave them be. From the 12th floor, the environments become worse, and the trials are mostly about overcoming them. And this may be obvious, but there are rare hidden pieces that can't be found on any other floor. One of them was the Jewel of Fire. Also, the diary mentioned other rare items like the Jewel of Fire. A considerable amount of time was needed to search all the locations. However, there were a lot of workers on board now. If he was going to accomplish something big, he might as well take everything he could. With the help of Red Dragon, Yi and Wu grinned at the mercenaries who were looking at him stupidly. The mercenaries trembled, although they didn't know why. Chapter 123, Mission 3. Search the large desert. That crazy, like there's something to see here. The mercenaries really wanted to cry. The large desert of the 12th floor they never wanted to return to. But they had a task they had to carry out here. Then within the limited time, find the item and come over to the 13th floor. I'll be crossing the large desert in the meantime. The mercenaries ended up following his order. And the time that Yi and Wu had given them was tight. They needed to be speedy. Watching them spread out, Yi and Wu secretly called his spirit familiars. It'll be easy to tell if there's a spy with this. Yi and Wu began to cross the large desert. A breeze filled with heat and sand flew at him. But Master, Chirpy climbed on Yi and Wu's shoulder and spoke to Yi and Wu. What? Why do they listen to you so well? Not sure. Yi and Wu avoided the question and stroked Chirpy's head. Although he had grown, he was still young. It wouldn't be good for him to hear all the dirty details. Then what are they going to find? The Jewel of Fire. Jewel, what's that? Chirpy adorably tilted his head. Something yummy. Wow, really? Yi and Wu nodded his head at Chirpy's shining eyes. The Jewel of Fire would definitely be a tasty treat for Chirpy. And healthy too. I'll give half to Chirpy and the other half to the spirit familiars. Recently, the spirit familiars had been met with a limit with their growth. It was because of the limited growth of the black bracelet. So Yi and Wu had been thinking of other ways to strengthen them. Strengthening of properties. If he could give them other properties than the dark and evil properties they already had. The reason why the Jewel of Fire was special was because it was a good stone for strengthening. Also, it was a good material for alchemy. It hurt having more of it. Being able to mine those items with workers. For the first time, Yi and Wu liked Red Dragon. Then, you have to give me a lot of yummy things. Have to, promise. I will, so don't worry. He, I hope they're tasty. Chirpy started drooling and his eyes were shining like stars. And he made a big yawn with his beak. He blinked his eyes. HNG, I'm getting sleepy. I want to sleep. Rest a bit. Okay, you have to wake me up when the snack comes, okay? Chirpy nodded and scattered into a blue light to enter into Yi and Wu's body. Unlike the 11th floor, where legendary beasts could comfortably exist, the rules of the 12th floor were completely different. Because of that, they borrowed players' bodies and assimilated to them. This was what Chirpy did. After evolving into a greater species, his energy wasn't settled. If he swallowed the Jewel of Fire on top of that, it would take more time. So Chirpy was sleeping for most of the day to take care of his energy. However, when Chirpy entered his body, the resting area was a bit special. Stone, it's here again. Yi and Wu licked his lips feeling the stone that was located next to his heart. It was only a minuscule bit, but Yi and Wu could feel the stone moving a few times. It didn't give him energy, or do anything. It just acted as a brazier for the fire that the phoenix left for him, and now it was a shelter for Chirpy. Once, he had asked Chirpy why he rested in the stone. And Chirpy tilted his head as if he didn't know and responded. I'm not sure, it's just nice in there. Nice. Yeah, it's warm and cozy, so sleep just comes to me. Totally. He thought it was because that was where the phoenix's fire was. But after some observation, he realized that wasn't the case. Chirpy's energy settled faster inside the stone. And sturdily. Better than the magic circuit. Like it was different from how it looked like on the surface. That might be the reason why the spark from the phoenix settled there. Yin Wu's gaze sunk while trying to feel the stone. It's only a minute amount, but I can feel parts of the void in there. And the saber-toothed tiger's remains were tightly wrapped around it. He realized that the stone he thought was a failure wasn't a failure after all. It was just incomplete. It was ready to be completed if only given the materials. And the parts of the 4 legendary beasts might be materials as well. However, Yin Wu couldn't leave such an uncontrollable and creepy thing alone. He didn't know when it might be a poison to him. He didn't like that it was the result of the sacrifice of multitudes, and if he couldn't control it, it was useless. But it wasn't like there was a way to get rid of it. And it became more difficult now that the legendary beast's vestiges were there, and because Chirpy thought of it as his shelter. Should I just complete it? Or should I think more about how to get rid of it? Yin Wu clicked his tongue at the stone that had become weak again. And he stopped thinking about it. Since Chirpy was using it, it probably couldn't harm him for the time being. So he was going to focus on crossing the large desert first. All trials have been finished. You have accomplished the miracle of crossing the large desert without a single break. Additional karma is being rewarded. You have received 5,000 karma. You have received an additional 3,000 karma. The received karma is being added to the total karma. Will you put your name on the Hall of Honor? You have denied registration. You can change your mind regarding registration whenever you want as your accomplishments are being recorded in the history of the tower despite not being revealed. Will you ascend to the 13th floor? Yin Wu stepped inside the blue portal. As he had expected, it wasn't that difficult to cross the large desert. Rather, it was almost fun, like he was hiking. Since he could incorporate training. Although the sand that sunk with every step and the atmosphere that was boiling hot enough to leave burn marks wasn't that great. Not only was he able to increase his physical resistance to outer influences, it was also a big help in increasing his property of holy fire. And he had installed additional cores, so he was finished with 108 cores. He didn't forget about training while crossing the desert either. Fant and Adora would have shaken their heads if they saw him. Yin Wu looked back at the large desert he had crossed, and was about to cross over to the 13th floor without any regrets. But then. Please wait just a moment. A portal opened mid-air and a rabbit guardian fell with a plop. It was Laplace, the guardian he met on the 11th floor. Yin Wu looked at him with slightly surprised eyes. Why was someone that hadn't appeared once during the 11th floor here? Yin Wu thought for a moment that he shouldn't be caught here, but he shook his head. The guardians of the tower were limited by the tower's system and couldn't interfere in players' businesses. Then why was he here? Yin Wu stopped walking and started at Laplace. Without any questions, just a dry gaze, as if asking why he was here. You're just like when I met you in the past, quiet. You seem to be busy, so I'll just get straight to the point. Yin Wu didn't make any reply. Laplace smoothed his face with his hands. He checked himself to see if he was smiling because he thought it might be interpreted in a different way and spoke. Currently, player ## is heading towards the platform 3 Goddess Temple, am I correct? Yin Wu's eyes distorted under the mask. Even if it was the Guardian, no one liked their destinations being tracked. But Laplace just waved his arm as if saying not to worry. Don't worry so much. Us Guardians only exist to ensure a smooth environment for the players. We won't ever bother player ## or spread rumors, so you don't need to worry about such things. Yin Wu just looked at Laplace's red eyes. He didn't know what he was thinking. Now that he thought about it, even his brother had a hard time dealing with the Guardians. Especially the highest-ranking 12 Guardians. And from what Yin Wu knew, Laplace was the Zodiac's rabbit. Rabbits have lots of curiosity and like to stick their nose and interfere in others' businesses. He wasn't a trustworthy fellow. Then, why are you here? I'm here to deliver the words of the higher-ups. Higher-ups? You might not be aware, but as 12 Zodiac Guardians have another role. It's to be a messenger of the gods and demons. Messenger. Yin Wu widened his eyes at the unexpected response. I'm here to deliver the words of the demons. Laplace's smiling face while he was talking suddenly fell. And the atmosphere turned cold. The heat of the large desert disappeared and a dark and cold aura spread into the surroundings. Laplace's eyes turned into a bitter blackish red color. A shady aura blew in the air. Magi. Yin Wu read the energy exuded by Laplace and frowned. Laplace spoke in the demon's voice. Out of the platform. Three goddesses. Beware of the oldest. After he finished speaking, and magi in the air faded away like it was never there. The heat of the large desert returned, and Laplace's eyes became red again. Beware of the platform three goddesses. What does that mean, and who's the demon that delivered those words? Laplace shrugged. I am only a messenger, I don't know the details. Even if I do, I can't say it because of the limits of the system. Player ### needs to determine the specifics. Laplace laughed as he responded, but Yin Wu didn't focus on what he was saying and was lost in thought. The oldest should be Erd. But why? Yin Wu became annoyed. Now he was about to put his plans in action. But because of a variable, they were paused. It was the first time the messages that the gods and demons were observing him felt so annoying. Why are you delivering this to me? I wouldn't know. Would a mere errand runner like me know what the gods and demons think? Isn't that so? Yin Wu thought Laplace was twisting his words. But even after this warning, he couldn't not go to the 16th floor. It would be stupid to blindly trust the demon's words. A demon was a demon. They were a species that had a sly tongue. No, aside from that, he was annoyed that they were trying to move him however they wanted to. So he was planning on ignoring it. And I was expected to make the three goddesses mad anyway. It was obvious they were going to leave the temple in ruins trying to take the saber god's son away. He didn't think he would get a good reputation with the three goddesses after this anyway. Like I expected, you don't seem to want to listen. Then, I hope you go your way. I've taken extra care, so on your way to the 16th floor, there won't be anyone to bother you. Laplace laughed and bowed like he read Yin Wu's thoughts. Yin Wu moved past Laplace and was transported to the 13th floor. A light covered his eyes. The 13th floor. The trial has. ... After passing a few floors rapidly. This is the 16th, the gate of life's spinning wheel. Yin Wu was finally able to arrive at his destination. The start zone was an empty area surrounded by an expansive forest. There were 3 paths to leave the forest. The mercenaries were taking a break after having already arrived at the area. But they looked a lot different from when they had just left the 11th floor. It was the result of them searching for hidden pieces like the Jewel of Fire. Yin Wu flicked his finger to toss them his holy fire and spoke. Then pull out everything you've gathered. An indifferent attitude without recognition of how hard they worked. The mercenaries all looked like they were going to cry. This is like collecting money. The reason why he brought us along isn't to make us panhandlers, right? No way. The mercenaries didn't know that they were right on. No, they were avoiding the fact. Chapter 124, Mission 4. The trial of the 16th floor is beginning. Trial. In countless stories and legends, there is always a fate that covers the skies, and it is said that the world is one of the many turning cogs in this mechanism. There are many words for this. Heavenly society, fruit of good and evil, Yggdrasil. And in this place, there are 3 goddesses who watch over that fate. They spin life's wheel of fate, measure fates and cut them, and even look at the fates of gods and demons. But because of that overexertion, they aren't able to walk, and always wait for people to come to their temple. Please respectfully visit the 3 goddesses' temple. You can only visit the temple, and you can only ask one question, so please be thoughtful. Laplace kept his words. On the way to the 16th floor, Yin Wu didn't see a single person or a guardian. Like someone had interfered so no one could bother him. So Yin Wu thought it was all thanks to Laplace. Or was it that demon? He didn't have a way of knowing why Laplace or that nameless demon was so interested in him. Rather than being thankful, Yin Wu felt uncomfortable with help. Getting help from strangers definitely wasn't in goodwill. But there wasn't a way to reject the help as of now, so Yin Wu just accepted their help and got to the 16th floor. The 16th floor's stage actually wasn't that large. Following a large forest in the center, there were 3 different paths that led to different places. Each path led to a different path, and when you went on a certain path, there was no turning back. So when choosing a path, you had to be extremely careful. Erd of the past, Verdandi of the present, Skuld from the future. From Asgard's legends, they were the 3 goddesses that lived under the well beneath the tree called Euroarbrunar. They spinned the wheel of fate. So their temple was always full of believers who followed them, and a few gods and demons wanted to meet with them. No matter how powerful you are, you'll be curious about your fate. But these goddesses avoided the gods and demons of the 98th floor and always stayed on the 16th floor. They were surrounded by mystery. But from what I saw, they were nothing more than old grandmas. The 3 Norns Tien, they'll be referred to as 3 Norns and Platform 3 goddesses, were beloved but also hated. If fate was decided, and if decisions and opportunities were already set in stone, that meant free will and the ability to change things were non-existent. In a way, this was something that players who wanted to be gods lost motivation from. Since only chosen ones could become gods. And so his brother was in the latter. There was a famous incident related to him that made the 3 goddesses the laughingstock of the tower, while he was able to pass the 16th floor at the same time. Most people sought advice from the 3 Norns before climbing the tower. However, Yin Wu wasn't that interested. To him, fate was to be something that was decided, but also undecided at the same time. Because whatever happens, my goal will never change. So normal people never would have even thought of messing up a temple. Also, it was the reason why he disregarded the warning of the nameless demon. You have earned 182 of the Jewel of Fire. You have earned 35 of the Ice Crystal. You have earned 91 of the Snowy Field Rose. Using the mercenaries, Yin Wu was able to collect all the hidden pieces. He placed them all in his interdimensional pocket. It was the present Bahal had given him before he left the 11th floor. It was a small pocket that was quite an expensive artifact. It's nice because it's like an inventory. It was a present given to make things easier for him so he didn't have to carry each individual item. But Yin Wu already got rid of everything that was on it on the 12th floor, and he filled it with hidden pieces. It was obvious, but the hidden pieces were priceless. And with Yin Wu's knowledge, they were of an astronomical value. Although the mercenaries felt like they were going to burst in tears watching the items they had done everything to get taken right from under their nose. Yin Wu ignored them, and locked the pocket to put it around his waist. Then, if you're ready, we'll start moving now. The mercenaries all sighed one by one listening to him. Their mental and physical conditions were completely healed thanks to holy fire. Checking the state of their weapons, they turned to look at Yin Wu. Because no one knew exactly what the mission was about. But where is the base of Cheonwado? As they knew there were only 3 temples on the 16th floor, they couldn't imagine where the base would be. Yin Wu answered like it was nothing. The Temple of Skuld. Everyone was shocked. Exclamation mark quote. Are you saying that we're about to go attack a temple? The mercenaries were all appalled. Some even shouted. A temple was a holy place for a god. To dirty a temple was to buy the god's anger. Obviously, it wasn't something to react calmly at. Why, is there a problem? That's nonsense. Even if the 3 Norns don't move from the 16th floor, they are also divine beings. If we make them angry, they'll definitely punish us. No, you don't have to worry about that. They can only tell one's fate and not physically do anything. That's also why they can't move. The reason why they were called the Platform 3 Goddess was because their body prevented them from physical movement. They couldn't move their legs, hence the reason for platform. With great powers come great consequences, and this was its consequence. That was the system of the tower. That was also why the Guardians couldn't interfere in the players' businesses although they could move freely throughout the tower. But the mercenaries were still scared. Also, to deny this mission is a breach of contract, so you'll have to take responsibility for the penalty. Yin Wu got out a few of the players' contracts from his interdimensional pocket and shook them around. Expecting this to happen, Bahal had given him their contracts beforehand. In return for their high commission rate, the mercenaries promised to do anything Red Dragon commanded of them. And they had even pledged on a demon's name. If they breached the contract, their souls would be bound to the demon. They all knew what it meant to be bound to a demon. At the end, they didn't have any other choice than to follow Yin Wu. And since they were already here, they weren't confident in running away from Yin Wu. Then let's get going. So the nervous mercenaries followed Yin Wu into the forest. You have chosen the path to the Temple of the Future, Skuld. The forest was vast, so it was easy for a group of 250 to move. But because of that, they felt extremely pressured. In order to hide their nervousness, the mercenaries covered it up with their intent to kill, and Yin Wu amplified this with his magic power. So to anyone that might have seen them, they looked like warriors heading to a battle to die. What's that? Red Dragon. But why is Red Dragon? The path to the temple started turning into pandemonium. The people that had been waiting for their turn tensed up at the appearance of Red Dragon. Yin Wu and Team 2 didn't hide the fact that they were from Red Dragon and confidently headed down the path. As if saying that no one could stop them. And that if they tried to, they would regret it. So the believers and the visitors had to get out of their way. The meaning of the red dragon was that great. The strongest clan. The controller of the tower, led by the Summer Queen. So one wanted to be involved with them in a bad way. The apostles of Skuld became frantic. The head apostles quickly ran out. Why is Red Dragon here? I don't know what your business is, but this is the residence of a goddess. Please conceal your weapons. The head priest bowed his trembling head. He seemed to be a high-ranking player. But even he wasn't able to stand straight in front of Red Dragon and Yi and Wu's aura. Yi and Wu barely glanced at the head priest and looked past him at the temple. It was a round temple with multiple marble minarets. A holy aura emanated from the place. It was also completely different from the aura of Yi and Wu's black bracelet. He ignored his vibrating bracelet and looked at the head present with indifferent eyes. The head priest unintentionally flinched after looking at Yi and Wu and stepped back. He had received the blessing of a god, but he felt like he was going to be crushed at any moment. He felt like something was going to pop out the unknown abyss and drag him in. It was damp and dark. But it was a depressing feeling that made him feel like he was going to be swallowed up. Are you saying that because you don't know why we're here? At Yi and Wu's low voice, the head priest stiffened. What are you? If you don't know, it means they're looking down at us because they sent you, and if you're pretending not to know, they're still looking down at us. How should I interpret it? Yi and Wu didn't have any enmity with the Skuld Temple. But that didn't mean he looked upon them with favor either. Since he was here on behalf of Red Dragon, the bigger the fight, the better. Also, the more I wreck this place, the bigger the story will be when Cheonwado and the Saber got here. Yi and Wu completely released his aura that he had been hiding, and wind whipped around him. The high apostles and priests that had come out to dissuade him paled and fell to the ground. The believers and visitors quickly began to escape from the place. There were screams from everywhere. And so amidst all the confusion, Yi and Wu pulled out Vigrid and swung it around. The blessing of the sword. Yi and Wu chose the temple as his enemy, and so the sword became stronger as the apostles, priests, visitors, and believers were all recognized as his enemies as well. And with the power of the 4 legendary beasts, he had a colossal amount of magic power. The strong winds lashed around like they were going to rip the sky into pieces and flung the roof of the temple off. There should have been many defenses and spells in place to protect the temple, but none of them worked. Seeing the broken temple, the apostles, priests, and all the visitors that were running away looked at it with their mouths hung open. They were so surprised that they couldn't move. And during that time, the mercenaries acted on orders given beforehand to enter the destroyed building. They disarmed the soldiers of the temple with ease and entered. Yi and Wu followed them, walking through the path they had made. The high priests and apostles ran at him saying he shouldn't do that, but he ignored them and stood in front of the 13th room. He burst the door open to where the Saber God was. And it was then. Chapter 125, Mission 5. As if they had been waiting, a group of soldiers attacked him. They were soldiers the Saber God placed there to protect his son. But Yi and Wu already realized their presence and lightly used Shunpo to escape them, and simultaneously used Heaven Wing mana control to input magic power into Vigrid. He swung it around, lighting up holy fire along the knife's edge. A series of soft explosions split the air and their head exploded. It was a neat strike. The mercenaries who had been looking on widened their eyes. They knew what type of soldiers the Saber God would have placed there. And so they couldn't believe it when Yi and Wu took care of them so easily. He looked stronger than an average semi-ranker. But in a way, that was to be expected. He had absorbed the power of 4 legendary beasts at once, and he had almost finished his draconic body. With his 8 extreme fists and Heaven Wing mana control improved, it would be weirder if he wasn't that powerful. Yi and Wu carelessly looked away and entered the 13th room. Beyond the burnt black corpses, there was another door inside. He flung it open, and at that moment, a scent entered his nose. Yi and Wu frowned. Drugs. HMMM. Laplace hummed a song and entered through a portal. The gazes of multiple guardians turned towards him, but they just turned back towards their jobs thinking he was being himself again. The Laplace they knew was always in that state of excitement, and his subordinates struggled because of it often. When he was excited, it was better to just avoid his eyes. Laplace walked past the guardians into his own office. But as soon as he did, he stopped humming. Instead, he narrowed his eyes at the person who was sitting in his chair. Yavilk, what are you doing here? If Laplace had to pick the one person in the world he struggled with most, that would be Yavilk. Yavilk pushed his glasses up and lightly chuckled. Oh, I was passing by, our Laplace's office was here. So I came, and I heard a fun rumor. Laplace internally tsked. That old geezer, he would never skip over things. There were rumors he didn't interfere with business outside of the tutorial and the beginners sections. But it seemed like Yvilk had eyes everywhere. The old man that didn't take interest in anything. The old man who didn't blink an eye when something big happened. Why was he interested in this? Laplace had to hide his emotions and calmly fix his face, so that monocle wouldn't catch anything suspicious. And then Yvilk slowly opened his mouth. I heard some demon was interested in the lower floors, and our fellow Laplace was involved. Can I ask what you think of this? It was a familiar scent to Yin Wu. Many of the people he had dealt with in Africa were a part of an opium ring. And he had caught several of his subordinates getting drugs and kicked them out. Then, with the sound of a door sliding open, a teenage boy stuck his head out holding his chest. Who are you, mister? I've never seen you before. He. Well, it doesn't matter. What about girls? Did you bring some? These are too boring now. Change them for me. The room was a mess. Like there had been some sex party, there were one naked man and multiple naked women. And the women didn't look like they were completely in their right minds yet, looking groggily around. The heavy white smoke in the room was an indicator of how much drugs they had taken. A skinny figure, dark circles, and a loose expression, his features were well defined. It was familiar to Yin Wu, because he looked exactly like Saber God. Hanbin, the only child of the Saber God. Fuck, mister, do you not hear me? Why don't I see any girls? What's this? You didn't bring any. Hanbin looked Yin Wu up and down like he didn't like him. Yin Wu ignored him and slowly entered the room. And he crouched to observe the condition of the girl. The girl that would have been quite pretty was drooling with her eyes not focused. There were multiple signs of struggle on her body. You tied her up and forced her into it. And you made her take the drugs too. Did you kidnap her or something? Yin Wu's cold gaze turned towards the door. The frantic priests and apostles had come running. Their faces were pale. Wait, there's an explanation. Block the door so no one can enter. Just a chance. The mercenaries kicked the apostles that were trying to enter. They growled like they were going to cut them with their swords any moment. Before, they didn't strike, because they probably didn't feel too comfortable attacking the temple. But now, they didn't hold back. They didn't feel the need to. Unless you were a fool, you could easily tell what had happened here. There were torturing devices and signs of intercourse everywhere, and looking at the marks left on the girls, it was easy to see what had happened. Even if they were mercenaries who stopped at nothing to get what they wanted. There was still a line they didn't cross. Hey, the fuck are you? Why are you touching my stuff? Do you wanna die? Despite the situations, Hanbin just shouted at Yin Wu, not realizing what was happening. Bring him here. The senior officers of Team 2, Dylan, and June forcefully Hanbin out. His face fell. ACKKK. Let go. Let me go. Do you know who I am? Hanbin continued to scream and fainted when a hand hit the back of his head. Yin Wu lightly shook his hand in the middle of the air. Holy fire burned up all the white smoke in the room and sucked up the effects of the drugs in the girls' bodies. Saber God. His love for his son made him blind. He could somewhat guess what happened here. Hanbin had to struggle throughout his entire life because of his disability. And the easiest way to escape from that was drugs. Obviously, as his resistance to the drugs increased, he had to keep on increasing his intake. And after that, he had probably turned to sex to feel high. Kidnapping or human trafficking had most likely followed. Even the Skull Temple wouldn't have been able to interfere. It was the Saber God's son they were talking about. They didn't know what might happen to them if they refused to listen to his orders, so they probably had to keep on hiding this atrocity. But where did these girls come from? If they got them from outside, there would have been rumors, so they had probably used believers of the goddesses. A temple that uses its followers as sex slaves. Crazy bastards. They were colluding with Hanbin. They might have used the fact that the three Norns couldn't physically interfere to do this. Here is this. He made sure the girls woke up, and he left with the mercenaries in tow. Hanbin followed, bouncing up and down on Dylan's back. The priests and apostles trembled looking at the situation. He could see believers of the religion shouting at them like the news about what happened in that room had already spread. The high priest was glaring at Yin Wu, since he fell from a high position all the way to the bottom. Word of what happened here was definitely going to spread to the rest of the tower now. The reputation of the three Norns would also fall. But Yi and Wu knew that the reputation of Saber God and Cheonwado would fall along with them, so he smiled. The high priest glowered, thinking Yi and Wu was laughing at him. Yi and Wu ignored him and ripped the ticket. Soon, as he passed through the red portal with the rest of the mercenaries, the familiar 11th floor base of Red Dragon came to view. Oriboni, Hyungnim, you're here. I can tell you've made a big mess again. Adora and Fant, who had been waiting for him, stood up. Bahal, who had also been waiting in a corner, slowly stood up. With an amused face, he came towards Yi and Wu. His gaze was fixed on the Hanbin, who was on the senior soldier's back. Is it this guy? Yi and Wu nodded. Yes, clearly, he looks exactly like the Saber God. If he gets some wrinkles, he could pass for the Saber God. Ha ha. Bahal laughed. If you knew the Saber God, you would immediately think of him upon seeing Hanbin's face. To get this card without lifting a finger. He felt refreshed. Meeting Kane this year was my greatest luck. I was doubting it, but to think this trump card would come my way. The Summer Queen was looking for a replacement because her dragon heart was broken. To lure Leonte, no, the stone out, he had to do things meticulously. And so actually, he had a plan. He reported it to the Summer Queen, and barely got her approval. If I'm right, Leonte's stone was incomplete. If there was a way to complete it, even that suspicious bastard would come running. And he had already secretly prepared the materials to finish the stone. He was going to, accidentally, let the information slip, and lure Leonte out. Since his obsession with the stone wasn't normal. But there was a flaw in his plan. Leonte suspected the Red Dragon and Bahal, so before he checked the materials for himself, he wouldn't do anything drastic. So he was trying to find something to move him. And the Saber God's son fell in his lap. The Saber God was enough to push Leonte to pull the stone out. Since he had his son, the Saber God would be Bahal's marionette. Of course, he could throw his son away and choose Cheonwado. But Bahal knew that wasn't going to happen. If the single-minded Saber God was willing to share his magic to protect his son, his obsession for his son definitely surpassed his obsession with his clan and martial arts. Let's wake him up first. The senior soldier who had been waiting for his command slapped Hanbin's face twice. Red markings were left on his face. Hanbin shot his eyes open and came to attention. He wasn't able to judge the situation with a bunch of strangers, and he began to shout. I'm gonna tell my dad and he's gonna kill. But Hanbin wasn't able to finish. The moment his eyes met Bahal's, his consciousness that wasn't completely woken up yet because of the drugs snapped back to normalcy. And the first emotion he felt was fear. He instinctively knew. The person in front of him was someone who could kill him like he was an ant. Even his father, who was among the strongest in the tower, wouldn't be able to deal with him easily. Then he opened his eyes to his surroundings. The flag they had above their heads. It was the symbol of the Red Dragon. He was in the middle of enemy territory. So you're a little similar to your dad in that you can read people. You're not completely retarded. Bahal saw Hanbin's fear-stricken face and laughed. So he really was that beast's kid. Since you're pretty quick to understand, you probably know what I'm about to do. Right. Bahal had a violent smile on his face. First, let's go with your pinky finger on your left hand. How's that? Yi and Wu just silently looked at Bahal. With this, the oil was poured. Now, it was time for the fire to spread. Oh my, Hanbin. When the Saber God heard the news that Red Dragon had destroyed Skuld's temple, he thought the sky was falling on him. The woman that had approached him when he thought he wasn't going to have any women in his entire lifetime. His son was the only remnant of her he had. And that son was taken. And by his enemy, Red Dragon. He wanted to find his son, but because he didn't know where he was, he had to twiddle his thumbs. He was planning on going wherever, taking his iron box with him. He was even ready to give his life up. But, the moment he went to get his iron box, inside the tent he was staying, there was a tiny box. Along with an anonymous letter. If you want to find your son, bring the stone. A letter with just one sentence. He didn't know what it meant, but Saber God's head went blank. With a shaking hand, he opened the box. And inside, there was something he never could have imagined to be there. A pinky finger that looked like it was his son's. For the first time in his life, the Saber God shrieked in horror. Chapter 126, War Preparation 1. Volume 6 Chapter 1. My head hurts. The sword god pressed down his annoyance that kept on swelling up. After he had declared independence from the one-horned tribe along with the spear god, the world was just a big wall to him. Wherever he went, there were obstacles and trials. But every time, he won in the end. He dropped his enemies, stole, stepped on them, and stood back up. And eventually, his surroundings were filled with people like him, and now they were able to be Cheonwado's foundation. So to the sword god, the world was a wall, but it was also something that he just needed to keep on overcome. In the past, it was Arthea, and now, it was Red Dragon. But unlike Arthea, which he was able to easily destroy, Red Dragon was like an iron wall that he couldn't ever break down. That was probably to be expected, however, because Red Dragon was a clan that was considered to rule the tower. And they were the only group strong enough to stand against Alpharon. A fight could only be difficult. Although Cheonwado had comparatively less players, they had the more skilled ones. So occasionally, some people said that the only people able to be on equal standing with the Red Dragon was Cheonwado. However, the owner of Cheonwado, Sword God, knew that it was all bullshit. Even if Cheonwado gathered all their full strength, they were still rookies compared to Red Dragon. The famous 81 Eyes was only the beginning. There were thousands of rankers associated with the Red Dragon, and that wasn't even including the thousands of inactive players. More than anything else, Red Dragon had something the other clans didn't have. History and culture. The birth of Red Dragon was from a long time ago. At the time, many rankers had gathered on the 77th floor to bring Alpharon down, and they became a clan. That clan eventually turned into a large organization and left their legacy for the future. So Red Dragon became a clan that was larger than what was known, and it became an organization that was so tightly organized that it couldn't be easily defeated. The number of players that had been dispatched to the 11th floor was only the tip of the iceberg that was Red Dragon. And just with that, they were able to oppose Cheonwado. No, to be exact, they were bypassing them. They had even brought in the one-horned tribe by having the spear god pledge on his horn, but if Red Dragon really wanted to, Cheonwado would be crushed. The only reason keeping Red Dragon from doing that was because they didn't want to suffer a loss, so they were just hesitating. But Red Dragon definitely wasn't planning on backing off. And so the sword god was deep in thought. He didn't even want to be at war with the Red Dragon in the first place. He had only carried through with this because they attacked Leonte first, and he wanted to finish the war as soon as he could. But if he didn't, not only would the term, 9 Kings, disappear, the fact that they had surrendered to the Red Dragon would spread. And then, Cheonwado's reputation would turn downhill. Confidence and self-esteem, these were the two things that Cheonwado was famous for. And that couldn't just disappear. And so, the sword god was concerned. As the only solution, the sword, now. Even if Cheonwado was smaller, they were still one of the large clans. They had a hidden weapon. But to activate it, they needed a large amount of magic power. Even the sword god himself couldn't freely use that much. The sword god called in, sword. However, depending on how it was used, it could be a spear, arrow, or an axe. This was an item of a god that was thought of as a god itself. So he had never imagined using it despite having it, but now he was having different thoughts. It's still incomplete, but I should get Leonte out. To use the sword, he had stayed silent about it even though he knew what Leonte did. Stone, the all-rounder item, it would be a big help in using the sword. And so the sword god organized his thoughts. To throw away Leonte, and to obtain the sword, even if it was incomplete. Is there someone outside? After his judgment, he needed to make commands right away. When he revealed his intent, his subordinate entered the room with his head bowed. Did you call me? I have something to say to the fist god. Yes, sir. His subordinate blended into the shadows. And as he waited for Leonte to come, Leonte's servant came in instead. With the face of someone in a bad mood. There's been trouble. What is it? The saber god is trying to hurt the fist god. What? The sword god's face froze. Clang. This crazy bastard. How many times do I have to say that I don't have that? I didn't ask you where it was. I said to bring it. Leonte swallowed with a nervous face. The saber god's eyes were burning up. His raw aura was swirling around Leonte like a tornado, and the 9 swords on the ground were vibrating like they were going to attack any second. It was a fight that even Arthea had to struggle through. The murderous intent of the saber god felt like it was choking Leonte. Earlier, the saber god had come to the resting Leonte and spoke a few simple words. "Stone, give it." When Leonte heard that, his head turned white. The truth that he had been trying to hide was somehow known by the saber god now. But on one hand, he felt like crying. The reason he had struggled all this time was because of the stone. But now that saber god was telling him to give it up, he felt like this was unbelievable. So he said he didn't have it. No, he said that he didn't know what he was talking about. And the reply that came back was this: murderous intent. The saber god's eyes had a violent look like he was going to rip Leonte apart. "Bring it." A growling voice. Leonte trembled, but he squeezed his eyes together and screamed. He was also a rancor. The fact that he was being threatened like this hurt his pride. "I don't." Before Leonte could say anything, the saber god suddenly flipped him over. His swords became illuminated and split the air around him, and in an instant the swords approached Leonte's neck. Leonte stepped back, but he couldn't help but think that it was too late. His face turned pale, and something fell from the sky like lightning. Boom! Eventually, the light wasn't able to split Leonte's neck and was flung out. The sword god stood back up straight. And like a beast, he looked at the spear that landed right in front of him and glared at the spear god who lightly stepped in front of him. "What are you doing? Move, spear, I don't have anything to do with you." "Saber, what are you doing? Red dragon is right in front of our nose but you're fighting friendly fire. Did you really go crazy these days?" The spear god twisted his lips. He didn't like Leonte, but as the same clan members, he thought it was necessary to keep basic manners. But what the saber god was clearly what enemies did. It was a distraction for the clan. It was unacceptable. "Move." But the saber god acted as if he didn't know and stepped forward, pulling out another sword. The spear god got into position again. But the saber god stopped walking suddenly. He felt something from his surroundings. When he turned his head, the bow god was smiling coldly down at him from the top of a tree. The bow god's ability to use a bow was incomparable to anyone else in the tower. Some people compared him to the snake hunter Galliard, but he was still amazing enough to be one of the martial gods. The front was spear god. The back was the bow god. With his front and back covered, to get Leonte, he needed to take care of both of them at the same time. Even the sword god would have difficulty with this fight. But the saber god once again acted like he didn't care and moved forward. Bringing up the small amount of magic power he had, raised all his swords. And the spear god's face hardened along with it. He knew that the saber god was going to fight with all his strength. When the saber god used all 9 of his swords, it was that much dangerous. The 3 marital gods repeatedly faced off against each other. People near them began to step back. They didn't want to be involved in this fight. And so when the saber god was about to run at the spear god. "Just what is going on here?" A loud voice boomed from the sky. And a huge pressure fell on them, destroying the auras of the 3 martial gods at once. The spear god felt dizzy and turned away. The bow god put his bow down, tried to catch his breath with a pale face. The saber god, who had been impacted the most, vomited blood and tried to regain his balance. But one of his knees was already on the ground. Above him, the sword god quietly landed on the ground. He was wearing a wooden lion mask that the one-horned tribe frequently wore. And his famous 4 swords that were well known in the entire tower were swiveling around him. "What is the matter? Speak, saber." The sword god looked at the messy surroundings and turned to the saber god. Under the lion mask, his 2 eyes were firing up. The saber god's attitude was something he couldn't tolerate, as someone who respected order within the tower. The saber god clenched his teeth and forced himself up. His magic power started to dry up, and he was only able to get by with the Nidin he received from the 4 legendary beasts. "There's only one thing I want. And I just asked Fist to give it to me." What was it? The sword god didn't understand what the unmaterialistic saber god wanted too much that he was going this far. "What does the fist have?" "Stone, opening square bracket ... closing square bracket." For a while, the sword god was silent. "Sword, so you do know something." The saber god continued to speak. "I don't know what that stone is. However, I need to get it." "Why?" "Because my son is captured by them." Opening square bracket ... closing square bracket. The sword god's eyes became bigger. Everyone around him had a confused face because they couldn't understand him, but the sword god understood what had happened right away. The saber god's second-rate son, Hanbin, had been kidnapped and the saber god was being threatened. And they were asking for the stone. "So give it up." I'll gladly be punished later. I must rescue my son first. The saber god's violent eyes were saying that no one could stop him. But the sword god didn't reply right away. Because he needed the stone too. But the saber god was someone he definitely needed as well. The sword god realized they had fallen in a ridiculous trap. He didn't know who had set this up in Red Dragon, but whoever it was, they had done a spectacular job. It was obvious what was going to happen now. So the sword god had to quickly organize his thoughts. Since I don't understand the situation, let's settle our anger and finish speaking. Every second is important for me. I said wait, saber. The saber god shouted out, but he had to shut his mouth at the sword god's cold voice. The sword god swiveled his swords around, and eventually, they were surrounding the saber god. It was a tremendous gap in strength. The saber god bit his lower lip. Even if he was mad, he had to calm down. If he died before he got the stone, his son would die. And the other players were in formation to attack him any moment now. Frustrated, the saber god threw down his swords and relieved his anger that way. The sword god took back his swords as well, and relaxed. First, go into your room and calm down. Then I'll call you out after this place is organized. He spoke respectfully, but it was a clear command. The saber god grinded his teeth and had to return to his room with his subordinates holding his hand behind his back. Chapter 127, War Preparation 2. Chapter 2 Volume 6. Clang. The saber god threw and broke everything that was able to be thrown in his room. But his anger didn't settle. Instead, he felt more anxious. But even in this moment, his son was captured. He didn't know how he was being tortured, or if he was being threatened. He didn't know how his weak son, his son who was always sick, was bearing with everything. But he didn't have power to ignore Sword God, or to take the stone from Leonte. The fact that he was a bad father made him feel wronged. And he felt so sorry to his son. If only his son's father was a bit stronger, he wouldn't have to go through all this suffering. At that moment, knock knock, someone knocked on his office's door. The saber god swiveled towards that direction. He was locked in his room, so without permission, no one could enter his room. But who was it? And the presence suddenly disappeared like it never existed. It meant that the stranger's skill wasn't below his. Perhaps. The saber god shivered. A bad feeling swept past him. It was the same feeling when he opened the box his son's finger was in. The saber god frantically opened the door. And he was right. The same box as before was waiting for him. Again, the saber god fell to his knees and grabbed the box. The box didn't easily open because of his trembling fingers. And when he saw what was inside, the saber god couldn't keep his cool. The eye of his son was looking back at him. With a note. If you want to find your son, bring the stone. It was the same handwriting as before, and the same information was before. ACKKK. The saber god couldn't hold it in and screamed. His reason was already far gone. His bloodshot eyes became bitter. Magic energy floated around him. Saber god Nim. Madoden quickly ran at him after hearing the commotion. Seeing the appearance of the saber god they knew and respected, they paused. A magic explosion. You. Yes. You. Whose side are you on? The team leader swallowed. The moment he met the saber god's eyes, he knew what he meant. Also, the fact that his fate would be changed based on what happened here. And the answer was already chosen for him. Even if he knew it was wrong. The team leader fell to one knee. Since the time you saved me, I've always been your sword. Why would a sword have the ability to think? The saber god's eyes coldly shined. Then, gather the children. When it becomes night, we're going to start a revolution. The saber god has begun to move. Kane, thanks to you, things are going smooth. Bahal laughed and Yi and Wu's eyes shined. Did you plant a spy on that side? Bahal smirked. He seemed cold. Should I teach you something? Question mark quote. There's nowhere the red dragon doesn't have eyes or ears. Exclamation mark quote. They're everywhere. Really, everywhere. Bahal lightly chuckled and twirled the glass of wine he had been drinking. Probably because he was so happy, his nose was slightly red. He was drunk enough to disappear after a flick of magic power, but right now, he seemed to want to enjoy the moment. Yi and Wu refilled his glass. And accepted the wine given to him. Anyway, this is all thanks to you. Everyone in the conference room was complimenting you too. And setting up a new strategy. Also. Bahal set his wineglass down on the table. The wine tipped over the edge, and a part of it was spilt. Then everything will end. The war. and even Cheongwado. Bahal's eyes burned up. He was well known for his constantly smiling face, unfitting of his nickname, Flaming Fist, but right now, his steady and flaming eyes were shining, completely fitting of his name. And after that, my reputation will be set in stone. All the crazy bastards who called me a betrayer will be regretting it. Also, you'll be streamlined for promotion. It'll be a win-win situation for both of us. Only good things in our future. Quote. From now on, let's keep on growing together. Me in the front, and you in the back. I'll pull, and you push. How's that? Isn't that a nice picture? Bahal laughed again, like he was over the moon. And like these moments were waiting for him in the future. Also, Yi and Wu remembered seeing this in the diary. It was when Arthea was first made. The image of his brother, Bahal, Leonte, Heneva, and the rest of the original members laughing happily, drinking wine. His brother kept that memory in his heart until he died. However, Bahal seemed to have thrown away all those memories already. Guilt aside, he looked like he forgot about everything. He only desired promotions and power, and he wanted to step on everyone below him. And using his past comrades to do that didn't make him feel a thing. Yi and Wu knew he was talking about himself like he was his savior, but he knew once his usefulness was gone, he was going to be thrown away. And so, Yi and Wu couldn't smile in front of the laughing Bahal. He had never been more grateful he was wearing his mask. He said it was somewhere. And so Yi and Wu muttered to himself inwardly. In Arthea, he probably meant it was you. From the beginning. Yi and Wu returned to his room. Inside, Fant and Adora were waiting for him. You've returned. How was the drinking? It was one with the Supreme Commander, so I'm sure there were girls and Oriboni. Ahem. Anyway, did you get anything? Fant coughed after seeing Adora glaring at him. And he narrowed his eyes and asked. It's like what I expected. The Saber God will be jumping around like his feet are on fire, and Cheongwado will be split. Red Dragon won't miss that chance and start their attack. Hee. Now I'm finally free. Fant snorted and spoke. He wasn't feeling too good that he wasn't able to go to the 16th floor with Yi and Wu, and now thinking about being able to run free made him feel a lot better. And the Foreign Legion had made a great impact on the strategy this time, so they had received permission to take care of it. However, unlike the happy Fant, Adora had slightly concerned eyes. She understood Yi and Wu's intention to catch the Saber God, but she was worried that the situation was too much for him to handle now. Actually, it didn't matter whether or not the situation was too much. She was just worried that it would get out of hand for Yi and Wu. But she knew how detailed Yi and Wu was, so she was less worried. However, she wasn't able to help him, or know exactly what he was planning. The most important thing to her, at the end, was Yi and Wu's safety. But if she expressed it, Yi and Wu would only say he was okay. He never let anyone know what was on his mind. That was what was happening this time, too. Fant and Adora headed over to where Team 2 was expecting, waiting for the command to attack to fall. Everyone was on edge because they had already received orders to be ready. During that time, Yi and Wu calmly meditated in his room alone. In the room that was given to players that were at least of the team leader's position, people couldn't see inside that easily. However, he still used his magic power just in case and completely blocked out the outside. Before we leave, I need to prepare. Bringing Hanbin had already readied the game board, and Bahal was ready to break the game board now. And once he got what he wanted and threw away what he didn't need. Yi and Wu needed to get ready for that. And preparing for that required strengthening of all my power. He needed to pull up everything he had. Yi and Wu got out his interdimensional pocket. Everything he had done from the 12th to the 15th, making the mercenaries gather all the hidden pieces, was all for this moment. Come out. As he entered magic power into the black bracelet on his right wrist, his bracelet trembled and started to spread an ashy fog. And the ashy fog began to gather into a loose shape. Boo bowed to him. Grey Eddings to my master. Was it because he was originally a player? Unlike the other soul familiars, Boo was somewhat able to speak now. Although it was only a few words here and there. But that became the reason why Yi and Wu chose Boo. From now on, what I'm going to do requires something that can think at least a little bit for himself. Yi and Wu had only read about it in the diary, and never actually tried it out. From now on, I'm going to give you items in order. Absorb them in the order I give them to you. Be careful that not even a slightest bit of magic power leaks out. I understand. Be warned, if even a little leaks out, everything will be ruined. I understand. Boo nodded with certainty. Yin Wu was a little worried, but he believed in the power of the black bracelet. Absolute loyalty. With this, the soul familiars always showed a strength that was unimaginable. Especially when he ruined the alliances of the clans, they had shown incredible strength. The order is 2 of Jewel of Fires, 5 ice crystals, 9 golden flowers. Yin Wu gave the hidden pieces to Bu in the order that they were in the diary. Bu began to absorb them without any suspicion. Like when he swallowed the spirit beads. Bu, soul of the witch doctor, has successfully absorbed the 2 of the Jewel of Fire. Fire property increased by 1. Fire property increased by 3. Yin Wu carefully took the hidden pieces out in order. If there was even the slightest mistake, he had to do it all over again from the beginning. The mercenaries got a lot of hidden pieces for him, but there was no need to use more than what was necessary. Also, after Bu became stronger, he needed to use it on the other soul familiars as well. If this works, Bu will evolve to a greater level than before. Yin Wu didn't blink looking at Bu, watching with his draconic eyes to make sure there wasn't any magic power creeping out. What Yin Wu wanted right now was Bu's evolution. Balak called the result of his endless experimentation, strengthening item. Like its name, it was a power that strengthened power. However, the rest of us shook our heads seeing that. We knew it wasn't simply something that strengthened us. The strengthening item, after using the blood of monsters, bodily parts, and countless hidden pieces, had the ability to even change the foundation. Chapter 128, War Preparation 3. So it could be more pure. More efficient. Normally, as you climbed the floors, the rank of the magic power would increase correspondingly. However, the impatient Balak found another way to raise the rank. It was crazy. Too much time and too much materials were required, but we participated because who else would? And we thought it would be fun as well. But he had really done it. What a crazy bastard. But thanks to that, our growth was unparalleled. There were 2 main reasons why Arthea was able to be so successful. The first one was Jung Woo's meeting with the dragon on the 11th floor. And the second one was Balak's experiments. The dragon Kalitas's Tien, may be different from how past TL spelled it. This is the dragon that gave Jung Woo his draconic eyes. Body still wasn't ready, but I wasn't worried about it because it would be finished soon. However, the strengthening item was different. His brother hadn't written exactly how it was made, because it wasn't interested in alchemy. He just thought it was something amazing that Balak created. But he had still written the basic ingredients and their ratios in case he needed it in the future. And that was left in the diary for him. But if it was something that could be created from just knowing the ratios of ingredients, it wouldn't be Balak's product. When making it, some ingredients had to be frozen and some had to be dried, so it took a lot of work. But Yin Wu didn't have the time to check each and every one of those, so he needed to learn about alchemy. So he was planning on learning about it soon, but now wasn't the time. But thankfully, the spirit familiars didn't have to worry about that. They had the ability to absorb whatever they received in an efficient way. Even if he didn't prepare it, they would be able to digest it well. It would be nice if the spirit familiars could evolve by themselves. But the limit of the black bracelet doesn't allow them to do that right now. So I have to use this method. The only option in the black bracelet was the use of the spirit familiars. That meant he couldn't make them anything more than spirit familiars. But Yin Wu wanted them to be a higher rank, and he solved this by using the strengthening item. Bu, soul of the witch doctor, has successfully absorbed the blue amethyst. Magic energy has increased by 3. Water property has increased by 2. You have reached the limit of powering up Bu, soul of the witch doctor. It is likely that more leveling up than this will negatively affect the spirit's body. Bu, soul of the witch doctor, is suffering from the continued energy intake. His spiritual vessel is starting to crumble. Bu, soul of the witch doctor, has absorbed the black rose. His stats are not affected. Bu's body shook. Even the best vitamins weren't healthy if not taken in moderation. So it wasn't strange that his magic power was exploding from absorbing all the hidden pieces. Yin Wu forcefully stopped his crumbling body with black energy. But even in this situation, Bu's consciousness didn't fade away. He wanted to control his new power. The orders that Yin Wu had given him. To bear it, and to absorb. He was holding on with those 2 orders. As a spirit familiar who followed their owner's orders, this was obvious. Bu pressed down his magic power that was about to explode. His fading mind turned sharp, and he could once again feel his body. And even during all this, he continued to absorb what was given to him. Success. However you must. This is the reason why I chose you, since you have the ability to think for yourself. Yin Wu continually gave him black energy. And if his evolution was successful, he had already chosen who was going to be next. After the magician, it should be the knight. Thankfully, Yin Wu had a spirit that was as powerful as Bu. Shannon. If he could bring his power as a semi-ranker, Yin Wu didn't need to worry about pulling up all his powers to their max. And so while he was having those thoughts, Bu absorbed the last hidden piece. The magic power within that hadn't been able to expand was shaking around in his body. Then, Bu's body bumped up and down. He floated up like a balloon, but he didn't pop and came back down. There was new development. Bu, soul of the witch doctor, has overcome his limits. You have earned complete evil vestige. The evolution is beginning. Crunch. Like when Yin Wu achieved his new physique, the sound of something assembling itself with Bu could be heard. His fading body became clear and turned into a tangible shape. Little by little, it was turning into a human-like figure. Black energy and death energy spread around him and turned into a piece of cloth. It turned into a robe, and Bu slowly got on his knees to bow to Yin Wu. I greet, my master. It was a clear voice incomparable to when he was a spirit familiar. That meant he now had the complete ability to think for himself. Bu, soul of the witch doctor, has successfully evolved. The magician of death, Liege, has been born. Congratulations. You have found a way to carry out death. Continue to search for more methods. The power of darkness will always be with you. You have accomplished an achievement not easily accomplished. Additional karma is being rewarded. You have earned 5,000 karma. You have earned an additional 3,000 karma. This achievement will not be added to the trial of the 11th floor as it was done personally. You have earned the title, One Who Carries Death. Title, One Who Carries Death. The world is split into the two sides of life and death. They hate each other, as they cannot mix with each other. However, with this title, you will receive love and blessings from both dead and alive people. Effect. All properties regarding the undead increase. Control of the darkness properties +20. Yin Wu tightly clenched his fists seeing the new earned title. Earning a title meant that it was something that others hadn't easily achieved, or it was something that completely had to overcome his limits to be accomplished. Right now, his limits were only the black bracelet. However, the system acknowledged it because he had created Liege. Also, you have earned new knowledge about death. Your knowledge spectrum has widened. The proficiency of draconic eyes has increased. 35.1%. Yin Wu could feel the growth of his draconic eyes. He felt as if his world had grown. But on one hand, he felt slightly worried. What happened if Liege escaped the control of the black bracelet? He could take care of it, but he wanted to avoid that situation because it would be a waste of hidden pieces. Thankfully, Bu was the same. Master, is the person that pulled me out from drowning. Please order me to do whatever. I will willingly follow your orders. His words were benign, cut off from his body, not completely settling yet, but it didn't affect communication with him. Then what magic are you currently capable of? Liege's past life was important to Yin Wu. He needed to figure out his abilities. When I was alive, no, in my past life, I could do general things. What does general things mean? First, I'll show you. Could you, perhaps, give me a part of the souls you have? Yin Wu gathered a lot of souls passing the floors. Now, his collection was at 1,500. As he pulled out 3 of them, Bu lifted his bowed head. His head that was covered by his head was revealed. In his empty eye sockets, blue will-o'-the-wisps bloomed. Bu reached his hand out to the 3 souls, and fire bloomed at the tip of his fingertips. The first soul exploded like fireworks. And in the area where its dust fell, the floor split and a spotted dog appeared. His 2 eyes were dead. It's called Death Summons. Using souls as an exchange. I can summon them. If it has a corpse, I can take it out. Skeletons and zombies. Bu flicked his hand to return the summons, and exploded the second soul this time. And an ashy fog filled up his room. It was something Yin Wu had seen before. It raised fear, and was a buff skill for him. It's called Fog of Blood. As you can see, it can show illusions, and give fear to enemies. So sometimes, it gives the health and magic power, taken from enemies, to allies. Yin Wu's eyes shined. The effects of Fog of Blood were better than he thought. In a large-scale war, there was nothing better than this. And this is Corpse absorption. The last soul exploded, and in its place, a fire soared up and disappeared. Depending on how much there is of corpses and souls, basic magic of fire and ice can be used. Boo lowered his head. In my past life, I was a witch doctor. Unlike a dark magician or a sorcerer, I am specialized in corpses and curses. His voice was dark, but also firm at the same time. And so, right now, this is all I can do. But I can become stronger. And I won't disappoint my master by becoming a stronger liege. As much as Boo was talented in corpses and curses, he was weak with basic magic. So Boo considered that to be a shame. If only he was an ordinary dark magician, he could be a bigger help to Yi and Wu. He thought there were limits in being a witch doctor. But Yi and Wu firmly shook his head. Magic could be learned from skill books, but that was completely different from dealing with corpses and souls. Yi and Wu dreamed of a one-man army. But because there were limits on what he himself could do, it seemed that he had met a chief of staff who could support his back. It was hard fighting by myself. Now I can relax and leave it to him. Since he dealt with corpses, he could probably deal with spirit familiars as well. And with fog of blood, death summons, and corpse absorption, the battlefield could be fixed to however Yi and Wu preferred. So Yi and Wu comforted him saying it was okay. Grateful, Boo bowed his head even lower. I will not disappoint master. Boo left those words and quietly disappeared like fog. And now what's left? Since he had gotten a magician for support, he needed a knight to fight with him. Yi and Wu summoned Shannon's soul from his collection. Fitting of a semi-ranker's soul, it was different from its foundation. The color and aura were deeper. Yi and Wu changed the rest of the souls into black energy and gave it to Shannon's soul. With the sound of something cracking, the souls began to clang against each other and turn into a spirit familiar. Where is this? Shannon's spirit familiar raised his head. He was definitely a spirit familiar, but still had some of his consciousness left. This is Red Dragon's base. Shannon, you. Shannon looked around and turned towards the person calling his name. And his eyes widened. I definitely died by your hands. Shannon was confused for a moment, then nodded like he thought of something. I see. I died, then came back to life. I heard there were witch doctors or dark magicians who could deal with souls, but I've never heard that the souls could be completely recovered like this. The black bracelet was powerful enough to swallow Astrape. It couldn't be compared to other artifacts. But there was no need for Yi and Wu to explain that, so he didn't say anything. Instead, he calmly looked at Shannon and thought of how to get him on his side. Although he was a spirit familiar, he was so outstanding that he couldn't help but become greedy. Just considering the level of his awareness, he's much sharper than Boo. If I can make this person my death knight. Usually when spirit familiars were born, they put their instincts as a soul first. However, Shannon clearly had a sharp mind. Also, my request. What happened? His request to send his subordinates away even if he died. Yi and Wu nodded his head. I sent them all away. However, the guys who already. That's fine. If I wanted more than that, I would be greedy. Shannon waved his hand and cut Yi and Wu off. He narrowed his eyes to look at Yi and Wu. Anyways, if you called me here, you must want something. And the fact that you're at Red Dragon and not Cheonwado is strange too. Yi and Wu nodded and explained what he had been through. The reason why he was at Red Dragon. And his motive for calling Saber God out. Shannon's eyes became bigger, and then he laughed. Haha, you turned your back against Saber God because of your relationship. I like that, so you're not just as greedy as I heard. Shannon was someone who considered his subordinates' lives as his own, so he seemed to like Yi and Wu's goal. However, but you want me to be a death knight? That means you want me to work beneath you? Yes, I refuse. ... You don't even need to ask why. I was born and raised in Red Dragon, and I have no will to leave them even after death. From when Shannon was born, he was under Red Dragon. His loyalty for his clan was unprecedented. One could even say his affection for his subordinates came from his affection for his clan. Yi and Wu inwardly clicked his tongue. He didn't expect it to be easy. But to think he would be this stubborn. But I must get him on my side. It wasn't easy to get a soul like Shannon. And he wanted to learn about the focal points he had taught him. He wanted to convince him, but if that wasn't possible, he was planning on forcing him to surrender. However, in that process, his soul could be damaged. Because there wasn't any other way, there was nothing he could do. There's nothing I can do. Then I'll have to force you. Do you have a method? I collected your soul, but do you think I can't bind you to me? That's true. That can't happen. Oh no, Shannon muttered like he wasn't happy. Yin Wu extended his hand and paused. It seemed like he had changed his mind. You can't just send me off. I can't. You have a lot of greed. Not even letting me rest in death. Well, okay, that doesn't sound too bad. Since I was under Red Dragon during my entire life, looking outside of it should be okay. Shannon was lost in his thoughts for a moment, and turned to look at Yin Wu. Then I have a condition. Yin Wu pulled his hand back. Go ahead, I'll obey you. However, leave my free will alone. And make me stronger than when I was alive. Not just the power of a semi-ranker, but of a high ranker. Shannon's blurry eyes shined. Actually, there was something that surpassed his loyalty to Red Dragon. The passion to become a strong person. He was blocked on the 49th floor and had to remain a semi-ranker. If there was one thing he regretted, it was not becoming a ranker and climb the 77th floor. He wanted to reach the standards for being strong. Also, that was what Yin Wu wanted as well. I will also become stronger. More than others. Then it's settled. To be honest, I knew it from when I first saw you. That you were the same species as me. Hee. But before that, there's something I have to do. And you might have to fight against Red Dragon and meet your comrades in war. The last test. I'm prepared for that much. I'm starting a new life, so there's no need to place too much thought for the past things, right? He was so different now from a while ago that it seemed like he was someone else. Why did your mind suddenly change? I don't want to be stubborn. ... And I don't want to break myself. So if I have to cross over. Yeah, I wanted to cross over with my mind intact. Also. Yin Wu thought Shannon might be smiling. I'm curious about what you'll do in the future. Wouldn't I be able to see that if I stay by your side? Yin Wu shook his head. Shannon was difficult to understand. On one hand, he was sturdy and firm. But on the other hand, he was soft enough to bend over. But he was sure of one thing. With this guy, his path would be smoother. Yin Wu pulled out his subspace pocket. Then now, please absorb the items in the order I give them to you. Chapter 129, War Preparation 4. The Spirit Familiar has successfully evolved. The Knight of Death, Death Knight has been created. You have achieved, opening square bracket ... closing square bracket. Death Knight has pledged allegiance to you. Binded to the despair of the Black King, it will become your trusted sword and shield. Will you assign it a name? Shannon. The name, Shannon, has been assigned to the Death Knight. Allegiance has increased by 15. Authority has increased by 5. Greetings to my new master. Black armor and helmet, and with the sword breaker that he had used when he was alive planted in the ground in front of him, Death Knight was on one knee in front of Yin Wu. Thank you for. Please don't be so formal to me anymore. I am your servant and your knight. A master doesn't speak formally to their servant. With a firm voice, Shannon raised his head. In the dark helmet he was wearing, nothing could be seen, but Yin Wu thought that Shannon was laughing. Of course, I plan to speak informally to you sometimes. Yin Wu grinned at the humorous Death Knight. He was going to be a different set of arms and legs compared to Bu. And so, Yin Wu's military was increasing one by one. So focal points can only be sensed through senses. As Yin Wu wanted, the first thing he did after completing Shannon was ask about the focal points he had suffered from in the past. Correct, choosing one from the many possibilities. Unless you can read the future, you have to rely on your senses. Obviously, the senses we're talking about are different from the physical 5 senses we have. It was the 6th sense. Unlike the 5 senses, it was something that dealt with intangible things. Yin Wu felt the 6th sense a few times. Back to his time in Africa. When his back had felt cold for some reason. Or when he sometimes had migraines, it meant that there was danger nearby. So Yin Wu thought his 6th sense was pretty well developed. However, Shannon was speaking of a 6th sense that was sharper than that. A decision based on sense. In a way, it was closer to predicting the future. Usually, this is easy for people of your level to understand. I guess it's a bit hard for you. Well, I was completely surprised when I learned that you only started learning martial arts recently. Shannon nodded like he understood. From his viewpoint, Yin Wu's growth and direction was different from others. While others created their own path from building a foundation, Yin Wu's method was building from the very top. Usually, growth like this was bound to fall. However, Yin Wu's tower of growth was steady. The more you climb, The more skilled players you meet, there's greater chance you'll meet people who use focal points. So I recommend you learn it quickly. Is there a way to learn it faster? There is. Yi and Wu's eyes shined. What is it? Shannon nodded like it was obvious. Fight more, and experience it more. That's obvious. And memorize all the patterns. Yi and Wu exclaimed in amazement. Shannon's words made sense. If he couldn't memorize it, it was better to memorize it. It was something he frequently did. Memorizing is best in these situations. If you continue to memorize a lot, you'll be able to apply it when it's needed. Yi and Wu laughed along with Shannon. He realized what Shannon was trying to say. And you can teach me those patterns. Right, you're clever, master. Subordinates are made to be used in these situations. Shannon slowly got up. He gripped his dark sword breaker. Since we're on the subject, let's get to it. You seem to be rushed on time too. But training with Shannon wasn't able to last too long. While learning about the focal points, the command to gather fell. Yi and Wu, Fant, Adora, and the Foreign Legion moved to the center. And at that moment, thump, thump, Yi and Wu grabbed his chest, which was suddenly beating faster. His eyes hardened. He was even circulating his magic circuit, but mana was spinning around. His draconic eyes opened and looked at the sky. When he looked at the sky, Yi and Wu belatedly realized why his body was behaving this way. A heavy atmosphere was filling the air. Like the sky and ground was only meant for it, it stood in the middle of it all. Red scales, a firm chin and vertical eye slits. A body of 30 meters. Single quote ... Dragon. The Summer Queen had returned to her original form and was sitting there. The namesake of Red Dragon, the second oldest person in the entire tower after Alpharon, was releasing its aura. Dragon Fear. The skill out the many the dragon had, it was an aura that bent players over. Yi and Wu tried to find his calmness again. The reason why his heart was beating so fast was probably because the dragon in him had reacted to another dragon's presence. But he couldn't reveal that. Yi and Wu calmed himself down to the best of his abilities. Thankfully, the draconic eyes settled down and his magic circuit became quiet. But to enter an area where dragon fear was placed, one had to be very nervous. Fortunately, she wasn't looking in his direction. With vertical eyes that caused shivers, she was looking at the sky. It was a pitch-black sky. She seemed to be trying to peek at the shining moon. Then, she slowly lifted her body and spread her wings open. It's opening, with the voice of the Summer Queen. Along the sky, a large green portal spread open. And in that moment, there's nothing you'll get from helping me. Rather you'll be labeled as traitors. For the last time, I'll give you the chance you leave. After this, I won't accept any requests to leave. The Saber God was speaking to his subordinates. Along with the Madoden at the center, 9 other legions like the Shindoden and Jindoden were there. They were about to cross the bridge, so people who wanted to quit should stop now. That he wouldn't stop them. That's what the Saber God was saying. It meant that he still had the ability to reason. And that appearance of his only touched his subordinates more. He was full of the desire to save his son, but they felt his desperate want to still keep his logical mind. Eventually, no one left. They just looked at the Saber God with firm eyes. The Saber God clenched his teeth. He could feel to the bone that he hadn't lived his life in vain. Your lives, I'll gladly accept them. The Saber God's eyes started to glimmer. Then let's go. Madoden, Shindoden, and Jindoden first attacked the Hogumden, who was watching over the Saber God. You guys. The team leader of Hogumden trembled his lips at the knife under his chin. His eyes were asking if they knew the meaning of what they were doing. If we didn't know, we wouldn't have started in the beginning. But the team leader of Madoden just flung his sword around without any hesitation. The team leader of Hogumden's head rolled on the floor. Just a few hours ago, they were comrades that were drinking together. He expected to feel a bit guilty, but surprisingly, he didn't feel anything. He thought it might be because he had expected to die. But he thought this kind of death wasn't too bad either. He lived and died by his sword. If he was going to die by someone else's sword, it wouldn't be too bad to die for his master. The team leader of Madoden looked around. Except for a few members, they were all gathered around him. Like they were finished, their clothes were stained with blood. The location of the target. Target, he meant Leonte. Currently the Honorable Sword God. No, the Sword God is protecting him himself in his office. The possibility of them being separated. Not any right now. I don't know what they're talking about, but it's getting long. Madoden's leader clicked his tongue. So is the only thing we can do attack the Sword God? It'll be difficult. It would have been easy to just take out Leonte. But with the sword god, things turned difficult. He had the ability to take on all the other martial gods, but no one could guess what he was thinking. To the rest of the Cheonwado, the sword god was equivalent to fear. Of course, they weren't going to give up. Send the signal. The vice leader exploded the signal. Boom, red fireworks spread across the sky. It was the signal to begin now that everything was ready. And as they had planned in advance, other legions got up from where they were waiting. Quakwang, fire, bomb, fire in the supplies attic. Red Dragon has attacked. The strategy was simple, they were planning on raising chaos in their base. Then, while everyone was busy thinking it was an attack from Red Dragon, Saber God and Madoden would attack where Leonte was. Thankfully, their first plan has already succeeded. As fire soared high above the base, players shouting could be heard. They screamed to bring water and that Red Dragon attacked. Each of the legions was planning on running around to create even more pandemonium. A lot of time would be required for people to finally realize what was going on. Meanwhile, Saber God slowly walked out of where he had been staying. With his iron box on his box, his eyes were cold. And his aura was creating a whirlwind around him. The Niden from the 4 legendary beasts were spinning around him. He had regained his strength from his old days. No, now, he was stronger. He had activated his secret weapon just in case. It had the effect of pulling his magic power to its greatest potential. Usually it was used by kamikazes or during times of danger, but the Saber God didn't care. His body was already being broken from magic power leaving him, and he could do whatever to kill the sword god. And the effect of it was immense. Magic power filled his body, and the energy of the 4 legendary beasts he hadn't been able to digest mixed with it to strengthen his magic power. He felt like he could destroy anything that came his way. With his power, not only did he feel like he could break Sword God, but all the other martial gods who followed him including Leonte. But he knew if he let go to his instincts, he would burn up. So he tried to retain his reasoning while walking. His senses that became more sensitive told him where Leonte was hiding. So Saber God unhesitatingly headed over to that direction. Madoden followed after him. His pace was fast. Unlike his relaxed steps, his movement was rapid. It was hard to follow. They saw some people, but they quickly fell to the Saber God. Soon, they arrived to where Leonte's mana was wafting around. Saber Godnum, you can't come here. Security around the Sword God's residence was more lax than normal thanks to the sudden chaos. They could only be surprised at Saber God and Madoden's sudden arrival. But before they could act, Saber God swung his sword around. They were crushed with his new power. Tens of players disappeared into dust. Only Leonte and Sword God were left. Leonte barely blocked the attack by putting his arms up. His clothes were just pieces of loose cloth, and his eyes were filled with fire. Saber God, to the end, just hand over the stone. Then I'll save your life. How many times do I say I don't have it? That thing, I don't. Leonte felt wronged, because he really didn't have it. But he couldn't speak. Sword God extended his hand and cut him off. And with his lion mask, he looked at Saber God. Above his mask, wrinkles could be seen on his forehead. Do you really have to go this far? Sword God saw Saber God's condition. Digestion of the 4 legendary beasts Niden, and strengthening of his magic power. Saber God wasn't the Saber God he knew. If you compared just their aura, it didn't lose to Sword Gods. I'll ask a question too. Hand over the stone now. Then I'll give my life if you tell me to. Like I always say, the martial gods are equal. Unless a life is given voluntarily, another martial god can't ask for a life. Sword God spoke about their morals, but Saber God snorted. That's not it. Don't try to cover it up. That stone, isn't it something you need as well? And you were talking about that with his just now. Am I wrong? Leonte's eyes shook. Saber God had correctly guessed the truth. He had been speaking about the stone with Sword God. Opening square bracket ... So you'll fight for it until the end. I'm already here, there's no point in turning back. Hand over the betrayer. If you continue to be stubborn, there's nothing I can do. Under his lion mask, Sword God's eyes narrowed. And when he lifted his hand, his sword swirled around him. Then, the atmosphere shook and became blurry, then the defense mechanism broke and a new scene appeared. Surrounding Sword God and Saber God were thousands of players holding their swords up. Even with this, are you going to continue? Sword God asked with icy eyes. Chapter 130, War Preparation 5. Madoden's team leader's eyes shook. An illusion. He realized that everything they had seen so far was a trap. The pandemonium of the players was a trap for them. They didn't know that and walked right into the tiger's den by themselves. At the feet of the players who were glaring at Madoden, there were the heads of the dead Shindoden and Jindoden. I thought maybe that we should give you a chance. You are the first friend I worked together along with Spear. But you couldn't wait and had to go this far. Did you have to do this? Sword God looked at Saber God with glowering eyes. Like it was all his fault. That because he had betrayed them, all those kids over there were dead. But Saber God just looked at his dead subordinates with dry eyes. And he slowly opened his mouth to speak. You who judge everything from 1 to 10 by yourself probably couldn't understand. They probably died smiling, pitying them as only cursing them. Saber God cut him off, and kicked open the iron box he brought with him. And I hope you know one more thing. Saber God's eyes coldly flashed. Whether it be 1, 10, of hundreds. There's only one guy I'm trying to get. His gaze landed on Leonte behind the sword god. And it began. The 9 swords that were in the box flew out. Saber God took the biggest and smallest of the swords and ran towards Leonte with them. Protect the master. Make sure nothing can bother him. Madoden blocked their surroundings so Saber God could freely run. Players ran towards them with a shout. Boom. As expected of Madoden, who was in the top 3 of Chionwado, they killed their comrades without any hesitation. Rather, because they were stronger, they pushed back. Meanwhile, Sword God and Saber God were flinging their swords at each other. The collected magic power exploded and the knives flew around, creating a storm. Crash! The sound of air splitting rang in the air. Saber God pulled out the knives planted in the ground and continued to swing them around. The storm became bigger and forced the Sword God back. Whirlpool of knives. Tomb of 9 swords. Saber's God's signature movements were known by almost everyone in the tower. The whirlpool that he made by pulling on the knives in order made everything around him a mess. The wind was filled with aura and it ripped up everything in its path. In addition to that, he had pulled out 9 that he loved so much. With the Needin of the 4 legendary beasts, it was a strong gust of wind. Even the Sword God looked like a sailboat in the middle of a typhoon. But the Sword God didn't give up. Rather, he headed straight down the storm like a shark. And every time he did that, his 4 swords rotated in order to break the storm. His swords pierced the storm to break it, broke the aura in the air, pushed the storm down, and cut through everything in their way. His knives that were known as Death of Holy followed Sword God's orders to make a path for him, and he soon approached Saber God. Saber God was surprised at how fast the distance between them was closed. But he soon smiled, showing his canines. He was stupid fool that came walking in by himself. Saber God couldn't lose this chance so he pulled a sword that happened to be nearby and swiped the Sword God's back. However, right before it made contact with his back, it was stopped by his hand. The sword was tightly held in between his thumb and forefinger. It was an impossible situation. Saber God paused, not knowing he would be blocked this easily, and Sword God put pressure on his 2 fingers in the meantime. The sword broke, and its pieces were flung into the air. His magic sword that was called the name of a devil futilely broke. And Sword God stabbed his hand out past the pieces. One of his swords arrived at his hand. The sword deeply but the Saber God's shoulder, chest, and back. Saber God thought he might be caught in trajectory, so he quickly backed up and picked up his thin sword out. He was planning on somehow flicking out the Sword God. Clang! Sword God's sword greeted it like it was welcoming it and broke that sword too. The same happened for his next sword, and the sword after that. The knife that had a god's name, and the sword that had been used by a hero in the past couldn't keep up with Sword God's swords and just flew out of his hands. And when the 9th sword broke, Sword God's sword was planted in his right thigh. Then like they had been waiting, the rest of the swords planted themselves into the Saber God's body. His body shook, and he vomited blood, falling to his knees. Ow! Saber God had an unbelieving expression and looked at Sword God with trembling eyes. He definitely had more magic power. And his skills were more powerful than ever. He thought that his aura wasn't lacking compared to Sword God's. However, the results were too one-sided. He didn't scratch Sword God at all, and he had to face the humiliation of his 9 swords breaking. Before he even activated his signature skill, they had all been destroyed. The Sword God spoke with eerie eyes. That is the level. Quote. ! Saber God widened his eyes. And he bitterly smiled. He remembered why he had joined Cheonwado. Back when he was immature, and only wanted to become stronger. He met the sword god, and lost. After he got over his shock, he followed after him to learn. And as time passed, the gap between them only became bigger. Magic power and artifacts couldn't make up for it. Perhaps it was obvious. Unlike the sword god, who kept on training, he met his lover and had a son. While he was focused on that, he didn't get stronger. It was obvious his sense would have weakened. Was this it? The saber god thought. He put everything on the line to save his son. But it was useless. He lost the last line. Motivation faded from his eyes. As his head drooped with sadness. However, I'm thankful to you. Sword god's words confused him. What dot are you talking about? Sword god replied with a careless voice. But his voice was only heard by saber god. Because you successfully mixed the Nidin of the 4 legendary beasts, all I have left is to take it out. I'm grateful. Very. I never imagined that I would be able to get it this quickly. Should I thank Red Dragon for this? Quote. Saber god suddenly realized what happened. What sword god had been aiming for. Why he had told him to catch the 4 legendary beasts. It was simple, he wanted saber god to digest it first so he could take it. Why he tried to protect Leonte until the end. This was simple too, he didn't know what that stone was, but it probably had something to do with magic as well. He was always like this. Sword god always planned a few moves ahead, and just had to get what he wanted. This was one of them. Ha, ha ha, ha ha ha, saber god couldn't help it and let out a laugh. Whatever the result was, he was used, by Red Dragon, and by Cheonwado. He was only a marionette that was used as needed. Even if others honored him as a martial king and blessed him for being a high ranker, he was someone that was easily thrown away by his enemies. But he didn't have any way to resolve his regrets. He was hit, and his son was dying. Come, to me. Sword god spread open his right hand and placed it on saber god's left chest. He was probably planning on taking out his heart and Nidin. In that short moment, saber god thought about what he could do. He hated dying like this. And if he died, his son would also die because he couldn't be used as leverage anymore. His son that had lived in pain his entire life. Flowers had to die without properly blooming. He didn't want that to happen. He wanted to save his son at the very least. Then, he needed to have leverage too. What was something that would make good leverage? What would Red Dragon like? He thought of the note he received. It was the note that came with his son's eyeball. Along with the words to bring the stone, there was something else. Coordinates. It was where Red Dragon's base was located. He didn't know why it had been on there, but now he knew. Having gone crazy thinking about it, Saber God's eyes began to shine once again. His eyes burning up like hellfire made him look like his old days. Sword, you made a mistake. What? You shouldn't have told me. That the Nidin was mixed. Saber God smirked. Sword God tried to pierce his heart faster, but at that moment. Boom! Saber God used his magic power on him and broke his heart himself. And his gathered Nidin broke with it. The magic power inside leaked out. No, it exploded. Expanding itself, the magic power popped Saber God's body like it was a balloon. Then the magic power soared up to the sky. Then, it started to write something mid-air. Following the last vestiges of the Saber God, the power of the legendary beasts twirled together like a spider web. Realizing what it was, Sword God widened his eyes. He shouted the Saber God's real name. Hanryung. But before he could do anything, the magic circle spread out and a large portal was created. Above Sword God and Cheonwado a gigantic green portal opened, and under it, a shiny red scaled head revealed itself. Vertically split eyes and sharp teeth, and an aura that pressed down everything in her surroundings. Dragon fear. Dragon. The rare red dragons that were extinct in the tower. The Summer Queen. It was the moment when she landed in the middle of Cheonwado territory. Following the Summer Queen, Red Dragon's players fell like rain. And, in the middle of it, Yianwu was among them. Yianwu opened his draconic eyes and lifted his head. He could see the power of the legendary beasts along the portal fading away. However, they were already mixed, so they didn't easily fall apart. Since they were complicatedly tied together by the Saber God. But Yianwu thought that was better as he extended his left hand. Batori's vampiric sword burst open. It started to suck up all the energy covering the sky. You have begun to absorb the magic power of the 4 legendary beasts. The title, Legendary Beast Successor, is being applied and speeding up the process. Magic power has increased by 5. Magic power has increased by 10. The proficiency of magic circuit has dramatically increased. 55, 56.61, 62, 68%. Your vessel has expanded. The growth of your soul has been confirmed. The paused succession process is resuming to fill up the blank sections. Current progress, 100%. The succession process has been finished. Your dragon body is being woken up. Chapter 131, Wakening 1. The finishing of the succession process. It was something that Yin Wu had to finish. Because it was like an inheritance that his brother had left for him, along with his pocket watch. And it was proof that his brother had lived in the tower. Yin Wu, who was living for his younger brother, had to carry through with this. However, the existence of the draconic species was too superior that it definitely wasn't easy to inherit their power. Even though he finished the tutorial with the greatest score and passed the beginner section. Even after he got an artifact with the name of a god, and because the successor contracted to legendary beasts. Even if he trained his Mugong and completely set up his magic circuit. It wasn't easy to achieve. It was always within his grasp, but it left, like it was saying that a mere human wouldn't be allowed its powers. But now, Yin Wu had the great powers of the legendary beasts from the Saber God. Like it had found its home, the 4 legendary beasts' powers that had been floating in air were tamed by Yin Wu, with the title of legendary beast successor. The proficiency of Batory's vampiric sword fully activated with the magic circuit and took in the energies. The amount was so immense that it completely filled up the magic circuit. No, actually, it overflowed. And the leftover magic power was absorbed in other places. It entered deep in his bones. And it became firm enough to push away most artifacts. It entered his cells to wake up his draconic arteries and veins. Everything in his body was crushed and remade. And at the same time, the unstable tower that Shannon spoke about crumbled, and in its place, there was a firm foundation. Then, when everything was stacked, when everyone had passed through the portal and arrived on the ground, Yin Wu felt something tingle through his entire body. It was like he realized and saw a new world. From his chest to his neck, sparkling blue scales covered his body and nice sound. It was draconic scale. You have successfully awoken all of factor of the dragon. Your awakening is completed. Your properties have successfully changed. Trait, diamond physique, has been changed to draconic body. You have accomplished a great feat. Additional karma is being rewarded. You have earned 10,000 karma. You have earned an additional 15,000 karma. Your condition has been changed from incomplete dragon body to complete draconic body. You have gained the authority to view the applicable report of the draconic species. The locked report of dragons has been partially unlocked. The locked knowledge of dragons has been partially unlocked. The locked authority of dragons has been partially unlocked. Trait, diamond physique, has been changed to draconic body. Trait, draconic body. Summary. The ancient dragon Kalitas thought it a shame that a species that was as great as gods and demons disappeared like the giant species. So before closing his eyes, he left everything he had as inheritances and hoped that his species' greatness would be spread far and wide. And that feat has been delivered to a new inheritor, and a fancy flower has been born again. The great ancient dragon's grace and blessing will display the greatness of the draconic species in the mind and body. Territory of the dragon. Depending on the qualification, you can spread, Vina, according to a set amount of territory. Knowledge of the dragon. According to the qualification, you can open a system of knowledge, Hakma. Authority of the dragon. According to the qualification, you can open the power of truth, Cather. Swoosh. Not only was Yin Wu's body different, his soul had grown, and he could feel the world around his had changed. As his knowledge increased little by little, he could slightly taste it, but it was incomparable to now. If he could only view if before, now he felt like he could control it after some practice. It was the power to study the truth of all, and to understand. That was the draconic species. Although it was only the difference of a few minutes, it was vastly different from before. His rank had changed. He felt an overpowering confidence that he could do anything. This must be the source of the pride that all draconic species have. He thought that they deserved to think that way. And there was one thing that was most felt by Yin Wu. Authority. Since he had the draconic body that had received the blessing of the ancient dragon, he was now able to open the 8 authorities. The authority given to Yianwu was only on the first step, but it was still amazing. Yianwu desperately wanted to use it. And when he was heading to his destination. Opening square bracket ... Is it a new successor? That child had spoken about. Yianwu raised his head at the voice that rang in his head. It was a low rumbling voice. It was a voice he heard several times in the diary. Kalitas. Yianwu's eyes widened. The ancient dragon Kalitas had met Jungwoo through the mystical dragon, and he left everything to him before he closed his eyes. With the will to spread the greatness of the draconic species far and wide. But that wasn't it. Opening square bracket ... Here, I'll be waiting, until you come find me. Before Yianwu found a way to reply, Kalitas's voice faded away and was cut off. He quickly searched for a way to reconnect to Kalitas in his brain. But even with his faster thinking abilities with his draconic body, he couldn't think of one. He returned to his normal time at the battlefield that had slowed down because of his awakening. Noises and screams and the chaotic battlefield entered his view. With a new message, you have completed the hidden quest, Void Dragon's second test. You have been rewarded with, Bead of Abyss, Wrath of the Void Dragon, and, Nest of the Void Dragon. Because he had absorbed the Saber God's magic power along with the power of the legendary beasts, the quest had probably accepted it as his finish. No, even if he hadn't, he had set everything up. He thought the Void Dragon would probably be satisfied as well. However, Yianwu didn't plan on finishing it here. So he wanted to find more souls to add to his collection. The souls of high rankers. It was a material that would be used in so many ways. Opening square bracket ... Thank you, Master. Really, he could momentarily hear Chirpy's voice, who had been sleeping. After Yianwu told him that he would see something even more interesting if he waited a while, he quickly looked around. The first goal was to catch the Saber God. Now I have to try for the next guy. With his senses, he could quickly tell what was going on. Using the senses that his draconic body gave to him, his sense could reach further and more detailedly than other people could. There's a lot of guys to get here. Yianwu smiled so widely his canines showed. It was a place with rankers, high rankers, and the most superior players. It was the best place for him to gather souls. Also, battlefields were like Yianwu's backyard. It was the best stage he could perform on. Kane. He was planning on completely using his name that he received on Earth. His magic circuit released heat like it was crazy. It frantically circulated, giving power to his body. Following his back, wings made of fire that were mixed with holy fire wrapped around his body. And slowly pulling out Vigrid, he was able to increase the territory of his senses. He could feel the entire base of Cheongwado. It was clear to him like a picture. And in the middle of it, he quickly found his target. Found you. Thankfully, he was nearby. Yianwu headed over to that direction without any hesitation. To where his second prey, Leonte, was. Like a meteor was falling, the Summer Queen landed in Cheongwado's base and shook the ground. And the presences following her shook the air. It was an extreme aura. The presence of a draconic species was that great. And it reached a hidden fear within instinct. The weak players couldn't bear dragon fear and fell to the ground vomiting blood. Even the skilled people were affected. At best, the semi-rankers were able to take it, but it was too much for others to overcome dragon fear. And the Summer Queen didn't stop there. She tilted her head back and opened her mouth, and a new power that was as scary as dragon fear revealed itself. Breath. Hellfire flew on everything in the horizon. From where the Summer Queen was to the opposite direction of Cheongwado's base where breath touched. It erased everything in its path. In that, rankers were included. They couldn't even fight back. Amidst this one-sided scene, from this colossal aura that no one in the tower could fight against other than Alpharon. Red Dragon and Cheongwado, all players were completely pressed down. It was so unbelievable that it was questionable if that was really possible. Especially the Cheongwado members had to tremble from a fear that was creeping up on their hearts. They had lived their whole lives for martial arts, so they didn't easily crumble at meeting a strong opponent. But because of that, the wall of the Summer Queen made them crumble even more. They felt like no matter how hard they trained, they would never catch up. Despair and hopelessness riddled their brains. The feeling of loss spread across Cheongwado. Summer Queen, you bitch, you dare. Sword God realized his subordinate's feelings and let out extreme anger. He had lost the power of the legendary beasts just like that, so he was already angry to the max. And he was going to get the stone and the sword, but couldn't carry out his plans. Like pouring oil of the fire wasn't enough, he couldn't leave the Summer Queen, who was spreading the fire even further, alone. The sword god stepped on the air around him and quickly arrived at the head of the Summer Queen. Before him, his 4 swords quickly drew their trajectory and created a huge explosion. The air around his shredded to pieces, and the explosion rang out, covering the Summer Queen. And along that, the spear god threw his spear out. It created a huge explosion and cut the Summer Queen's side. It was a new skill the spear god had created leaving the tribe. The bow god pointed his arrow at the sky. With the strength of when he dropped the 9 suns, he pulled back his bow. And arrows of 9 different colors appeared, and fell like rain. The rain split into hundreds of different pieces and made a large net of light under the sky. At some point, it landed on the Summer Queen's head. Boom! That was how the confrontation between Summer Queen and the 3 martial gods began. Chapter 132, Wakening 2. While Summer Queen was blowing her breath at the 3 martial gods, the other rankers of Red Dragon spread out to the rest of the Cheongwado's base. Explosions exploded in various colors fancily, followed by the smell of burning and blood. Cheongwado's players tried to somehow stop them. But it was such a surprise attack, and those who were gathered were people there to stop the Saber God, so they were left defenseless. And on top of all that, the breath of the Summer Queen was enough to drop them to their feet. Red Dragon didn't miss that weakness. They swung their aura around and Cheongwado's players fell. Unlike the expectation that there were a lot of skilled players in Cheongwado, they easily fell to Red Dragon. And Cheongwado was able to understand why Red Dragon was considered to control the tower. And why they could say that they would get Alpharon. Although only a part of their forces were there, they were already overpowering Cheongwado. Kwak. Among them, Team 2 of the Foreign Legion, led by Fant and Adora, were contributing a lot. Maybe it was because they had practiced the 8 battle formations to the death. They were steadily pushing back Cheongwado without even a hint of surprise. Adora shouted out orders for left and right, to lead them in the right direction, and Fant went ahead of them to explode his thunder. And white thunder and ashes were left in his path. In the middle of that chaotic battlefield, clutching her sword, Adora was grateful that the One-Horned tribe hadn't joined up with Cheongwado yet. If her father had been here, the damage to both sides would have been immense. And on one hand, she was a bit worried about Yin Wu, who was absent. "I'll leave here to you for a moment." Without giving her a chance to reply, he suddenly disappeared. Just what was he trying to do? Adora slightly hated Yin Wu for hiding so many things, but she decided to focus on the fight for now. And to hide the fact that he had been absent until now, they had to lead the fight to victory. Swoosh! Yin Wu quickly moved in between the battlefield. With the magic power of the Nidin of the 4 legendary beasts in his dragon body, everywhere he stepped with his Shunpo left a blurry footstep. The players couldn't even read Yin Wu's movements because of that. Because he rapidly disappeared and they needed to focus on what was at hand. They were just a bit surprised at the energy of his fire and didn't think too much of it, thinking it was a remnant of the explosions. And so, while Yin Wu was moving to his destination, he was free to do what he wanted. Come out. The black bracelet drowned in a black light momentarily and let out energy around to its surroundings. With his sensitive senses, he could feel about 30 presences near him. Master, your order. With other monster portents, like Nolan Ka. Like Yin Wu had made Shannon into a Death Knight and Boo into Liege, he had changed the other spirit familiars. Monster portents, an evolved form of the spirit familiars. They have some awareness, so they are able to communicate. They are waiting in the shadows, and can have a physical body when they wish. Generally, they have a lot of influence from evil, and they are greedy enough to find chances to eat weak souls that wander around. The title, One Who Pulls Death, made it easier to evolve the spirit familiars. And he was able to add an extra 20 forms to his original 10. And the monster portents that were created were extremely useful in many ways. Not only could they easily change their form, their strength was incomparable to when they were spirit familiars. When they were in the soul form, they could easily hide their presence. And when they were in their physical form, they had the power a bit shy of a semi-ranker. Also, as their awareness increased to be able to communicate, they could determine things for themselves. It meant they could use their power down to the minute details. Their power couldn't even be compared to when they broke the alliance of the clans. Also, spread out, Yin Wu didn't plan on stopping there. This was a battlefield, death was everywhere, and precious souls were wandering around. It was a buffet for the newly evolved monster portents. As soon as his order fell, They disappeared into the shadows like they had been waiting. They were going to eat to their heart's content. There wasn't an ordinary player among them. Each of them were skilled enough to be in a large clan, and there would be rankers that had died by knives flying around. They were only to eat those people. It was clear they would experience extreme growth. And they could even end players' lives that were almost gone themselves. As they grew little by little, and as he gathered the souls, it was clear his collection would be filled with useful guys. So Yian-Wu laughed happily. He couldn't make any noises because he needed to move secretly, but he was so thankful to Red Dragon and Xianwado who set this stage for him. He laughed at the stupid guys who were fighting amongst themselves. Of course, it was too early to be celebrating. There was still Leonte, and Bahal. After he killed them, he couldn't relax until the war became worse. So Yian-Wu started to slow down as he became closer to Leonte. Instead, he hid his presence as much as possible. While he secretly moved, he got ready to attack Leonte from the back. It wasn't just Leonte in that place. There were groups to defend him, and groups to take him. There was a battle there too. And among them, Bahal's presence was mixed somewhere there. He's here to get Leonte as well. When he first met Bahal outside of the tower, he immediately went to attack Leonte after saying goodbye to Yian-Wu. At the time, he wondered why, thinking that there wasn't a reason for Red Dragon to declare war on Xianwado. He didn't even expect that the reason was related to Leonte. And now, he precisely knew the reason. Stone. The stone Leonte had been trying to create by sacrificing multitudes of players. He didn't know the name or information about it, but it was clear Bahal was trying to get his hands on the mysterious object. Because he had been able to read the letter that was sent to Saber God from Bahal's side. Yian-Wu didn't know where Bahal got his information about the stone. But knowing that he had the stone the bastards were looking for, he was able to guess Bahal's and Leonte's movements. He could borrow the strength of Sword God, and use the power he had left. Whatever he did, he was going to protect his life to the best of his abilities. And Bahal would chase after Leonte again. Because he thought that Leonte would use the stone since he was pushed into a corner. Considering Leonte's personality, that's what he would do. Because he valued his life more than anything. Obviously, that's only the case for when Leonte actually has the stone. So Leonte was going to prepare for Bahal, who was chasing after him. Since he didn't have the stone, he had to have the power to fight back. And if Leonte and Bahal confronted each other, if they fought over a stone that wasn't there, even if one was victorious, the damage to both sides would be immense. And behind them, I'll stab their backs. Yian-Wu planned on attacking right after. Along with the monster potents that had gotten stronger wandering around the battlefield. After he completely awakened his dragon body, and with the face of his brother. And far away, he could see Leonte and Bahal fighting like he expected. Boo-boom. Damn, Leonte couldn't push back his anger and cursed. Bahal looked like demon spitting out his fire, ready to follow him to hell. Some of the greatest teams in Red Dragon were protecting him, and among them were a few skilled players Xianwado had been hiding from the public. But Bahal just pushed them aside like they were nothing. He stepped on and destroyed them. Like his name, Flame Beast, he ran around like a beast. As if he wouldn't be pushed back, the distance between them decreased. Are you going to hang on until the end, friend? I didn't know you were such a stubborn friend. Leonte shouted out at Bahal's ridiculing tone. Damn, I don't have it. The stone that you guys are looking for, it disappeared. Gone. If I had it, I would have used it earlier, why wouldn't I be using it now? Under normal conditions, he would have hidden it until the end. The moment that he acknowledged he made a stone like that, his great dream would come crumbling down. It was obvious it would be taken by Sword God and he would be punished for it. But because of him, the war started, and he felt wronged because the other martial kings looked down on him. So when Saber God threatened him for the stone, when Sword God twisted his words and offered protection in exchange for the stone, and when the sword was right under his chin with the attack of the Red Dragon, he couldn't hold it back any longer. If he actually had the stone, he wouldn't feel so wronged. Then whether it was stolen from Saber God, or taken by the Sword God, he would be able to fight back. But the stone had really evaporated into the air, and they kept on threatening him for the stone. Even if he told the truth that he didn't have it, the reply was always the same. Even if he wanted to let them read his mind and show them everything he was thinking to reveal the truth, he couldn't, and he felt like he was going crazy. The people who were assigned to protect him were closer to people who were supervising him. So you're gonna be like that until the end. Very well, let's do it, then. Bahal looked at Leonte and thought that he should get him now. He thought maybe the stone had actually really disappeared, but he needed to make it appear right now. He was also in a corner as well. He didn't know how long the Summer Queen could hold back the three martial gods. So he didn't have long. There was only so much she could do with a broken dragon heart. And before the world found out that she had issues, he needed to stop that from happening. He needed to find the stone to fix the dragon heart and make her the strongest in the tower. So Bahal was planning on capturing Leonte in any way possible. If he didn't have the stone, he could make him create it somehow. Because Red Dragon could get their hands on any materials they needed. People, elixirs, whatever it was. They could freely gain it. But Leonte gritted his teeth. He felt angry because he was so wronged. If you're gonna be like that until the end. Fine, let's finish this, Bahal. Leonte exploded all the magic power that he had. Even though the consequences might be too much for him to handle, he felt like he needed to rip apart the guy in front of him to feel better. Leonte summoned a large magic storm. It was the storm that gave him the nickname Stormbringer. He definitely didn't fall behind Bahal or the other martial gods in terms of strength. Bahal was momentarily surprised at what Leonte said and narrowed his eyes at the familiar smell. Is this mystical dragon? Did you swallow Nidin? How did you get this? It was the mystical beast their friend had raised once. But how was this in Leonte's possession? Chapter 133, Awakening 3. But Leonte just powerfully blew out a storm like he didn't want to answer. The wind in his storm was considerably strong. Also, the mystical beast had the strength to eat all the properties that got in the way. Because it had that aura, it was easily able to eat the fire rain of Bahal. And it wasn't just that. A magic circle began to be created around Leonte and set up the protection magic that Sword God had put in place to protect Saber God. As they all opened, buffs were focused on Leonte's movements. On the other hand, Bahal was debuffed and his movements were slowed down. They were followed with blindness, poisoning, and then it disappeared. As they all collided with each other, Flame Beast spread forward. Every time he flicked his fingers, fire crackled out from his fingers and evaporated into the air. Leonte also received a lot of damage, since this was a battlefield, where one blink could lead to death. But even in that situation, neither of them backed down, and eventually Leonte was right in front of Bahal. Bahal paused in surprise. Until now, he had only been the hunter. But strangely, Leonte felt like the hunter now. He felt like he had instantly become the prey. And the moment he saw Leonte's violent eyes, he instinctively knew he was in danger. But it was too late. Leonte twisted his body and pulled out his secret weapon. The bracelet that was wrapped tightly around his arm quickly unraveled and stretched out. It was a sword. No, it was also a spear, or an axe, or a whip. It was an item that Sword God had left for Leonte to use when he was in danger. The weapon he didn't want to have to pull out until the very last moment. Dingnur, Tn, Web Links. It was the weapon of the god Odin for when he punished his enemies. The greatest knife that couldn't even be given a rank threw up light and filled his vision. Die, with Leonte's determined scream, boom, roar, quackwong, crumble. The explosion spread out to their surroundings. No, it ripped it into shreds in the form of a tornado. Bahal, Flame Beast, and the rest of the guards placed by the Sword God were flown away. In the middle of the, Leonte bellowed. He had used almost all of the Nidin of the legendary beasts, but thinking that he had finished that damned bastard, he felt happy. If only he had this power. He didn't need the stone. No, what would happen if he had this and the stone? Having those thoughts, he began to feel wronged again. With his senses that were working on full power, he felt something fly out from the explosion. Leonte, Bahal was running at him with a dangerously crumpled face. His two eyes were filled with anger and the will to kill Leonte no matter what it took. Leonte saw the Bahal from the past that had run at him at his appearance. He laughed at him. He had Gingnur. He would have been confident even if the Saber God ran at him, but Bahal was running at him. He thought Bahal was like a moth drawn to a flame. So he swung Gingnur down again. He would have to deplete all the Nidin from the mystical dragon, but it had to be done. He also thought of how nice it would be to use all the players here to make a stone. He needed to look for a method. With those thoughts, he stretched Gingnur out. The moment he was about to swing the knife's edge that was infused with the Nidin of the mystical dragon. Whoosh! Leonte shook from the shock from his back. Gulp! Blood poured from his mouth. As the strength drained from his body, the magic power from Gingnir slowly faded away. With shaking eyes, he looked down. In his left chest, there was a sword that he had never seen before. The blood stain was growing along the armor. When he barely turned his head to look, with chilly eyes under a black mask, there was someone tightly gripping his sword. Leonte thought that he was smiling under his mask. Also, he thought that the shape of the face was familiar somehow. "We finally meet," Yi and Wu coldly mocked him. Leonte opened and closed his mouth. The guy spoke like he knew him. In a way, it felt like he was really happy to see him. Like meeting a friend after a long while. But Leonte could feel the murderous intent deep in that voice. Who was this guy? If he hated him to this extent, it was definitely someone he knew. After the fall of Arthea, he had tried to live as quietly as positively, so he couldn't grasp who it was. So he tried to think deeper. But he wasn't able to. Swish! With the realization that something shined in front of him, his consciousness fell. And that was the last thought Leonte had. Wu! Leonte's head was tossed into the air. From his neck, blood soared out, and Yi and Wu's bitter face could be seen. Yi and Wu opened his left hand and put it on the corpse that was about to fall over. To take any the Needon of the mythical dragon that was slightly there. To think this guy ate Jung Wu's mythical beast's Needon. He heard that his brother's mythical dragon had disappeared after his brother fell, but he never would have imagined that Chionwado had caught it. But it was a relief he was able to collect it now. Because his brother's relationship with his mythical dragon was so special. And the mythical dragon was why the ancient dragon Calidus took an interest in his little brother. You have used Bottori's vampiric sword. It is absorbing the energy left in the corpse. Strength has increased by 2. Health has increased by 5. Yi and Wu looked at the dried up corpse and just tossed it aside like it was nothing. The corpse flew away in dust. Yi and Wu didn't put any more of his attention on Leonte's corpse anymore. This bastard was one of the guys who stuck their swords in Jung Wu's heart. He should have felt relieved and satisfied, but he only felt like he finally got something he had to do. He felt good, but that was it. It was nothing more than what Yi and Wu had to accomplish. There were a lot of things to get from Leonte, but because he had put him in his soul collection, he could summon him and question him later. And now, it was time to focus on his other prey. Yi and Wu turned his body. He looked at Bahal, who had paused on his way running over. Kane. Bahal's face was crumpled in confusion. How are you here? He definitely hadn't told Yi and Wu he was going to be here. Rather, he had told him to contribute to the war with the help of the Foreign Legion. Because the more he did things that caught attention, the more useful he would become. Bahal was genuinely planning on growing Yi and Wu as his right arm, as his chief of staff to grow Red Dragon even more. But even though he didn't give any orders, Yi and Wu was here. And with cold eyes, at that. In the 2 eyes that were visible under his mask, there was no emotion. He looked like a marionette. So, Bahal could feel that something was wrong. He didn't worry that the Summer Queen had told him to capture Leonte alive. Or the fact that he needed to get the stone. He got a bad feeling like he might need to get out of this place. Right now, he was too injured. Even if he was a high ranker, even if he was a skilled person in the 81 Eyes, Red Dragon's pride, it was too dangerous right now. So unconsciously, he took a step back. And he was shocked at himself. After leaving Arthea, after entering Red Dragon, at himself, who had never taken a step back, who was doing the strange action right now. Because of the embarrassment that he, who had never stepped back or given up, was doing it right now. And he was able to realize what the identity of the fear was. Dragon fear. It was weak compared to the Summer Queen's, but it was a murderous intent that could only be felt from the draconic species. It was the strength that pushed down all living creatures and made them feel fear. He didn't know why this strength was emanating from Yi and Wu, but he just thought that he needed to somehow get out of this place. Because he needed to let the people know the important truth that someone other than the Summer Queen could use the power of the draconic species. And he needed to deliver the fact about the guy who had definitely set them all up. If he couldn't do it, he needed to send someone from Flame Beast. However, announcement of territory. Before Bahal, who was sneaking glances at Yi and Wu, could escape, Yi and Wu used the authority that was given to his with his dragon body. Territory of the dragon, Vina, has been announced. Within the chosen territory, you can apply your authority. The first step of the authority is manifesting. Authority, dragonic blood. Within a limited time, all stars increase according to a set amount. Within a limited time, all defenses increase by a set amount. Within a limited time, all property defenses increase by a set amount. You have awakened the energy of the dragon. Dragonic blood. Summary. The ancient dragon Kalidas set up an 8-step process so the contractee can quickly adjust to the dragon body. This is the first step of those. The blood of the draconic species consists of pure mana, so it has an outstanding immunity and resistance. Also, it has the effect of maximizing the potential of the user. Awakening of dragon blood. You continuously received dragon blood. It shows off an incredible immunity to different properties, and with its resistance, it is able to resist other types of magic power. In addition, it has the ability of quick healing, and can fix injuries and tiredness. Sense of the dragon. In the announced territory, the user will have sensitive senses. As the proficiency increases, the sense becomes more sensitive, and it becomes close to determining the future. An unknown blue magic circle appeared below Yin Wu's feet, and it spread out over a large territory. Yin Wu felt power entering his body. His blood changed to dragon blood. All over his body, new strength was delivered, and the navy blue scales on his skin turned darker. As his eyes opened, he could see the most detailed sections of the world. His sensitives became more detailed as well. He saw all the land that was announced as his territory in his head. Information poured into his mind, that had grown bigger, like a waterfall. He was momentarily dizzy, but as his ability to calculate became quicker, his abilities to think became faster as well. His magic circuit cried out. The cores were all activated as one and magic power was released everywhere. Wings of fire burned from his back. Vigrid was shaking. This was the first authority, awakening of dragon blood. Forcing the blood of a dragon to flow in his body, it was a power that pushed all his physical powers to their extreme. And in his announced territory, he set rules. Bahal couldn't move, like his feet were tied up in invisible shackles. The more he tried to shake it away, they locked him in even tighter. And it wasn't just Bahal. Those who barely survived from Gingnir's explosion. The players who were looking for a way to escape away from the explosion. Red Dragon and Cheongwado, everyone's feet were tied up. Their faces became more pale. Dragon fear not only affected their bodies, but also tried to lock up their souls. And that wasn't the end. Along the magic circle, black shadows stepped out and began to take on physical forms. They looked like ghosts, or monsters. They were being summoned by Yin Wu's command from the battlefield. And with the appearance of the monster portents, an ashy fog was released into the atmosphere. Bu was holding his bead up and screaming. Dead souls, follow the master. When his orders fell, corpses started to shake and stand up from where they were. Undeads like skeletons, ghouls, zombies approached the alive players with their eyes rolling, emitting a horrid scent. In the middle of them, Shannon was leading the undead army. Like when he led his subordinates during his life, he controlled the dead using his Death Knight abilities and started to hunt the living. Honor to Master. Kwong, Kiak, Ak, they began to be hunted one by the Monster Portents Legion and the Undead Legion. Because they had already been injured by Gingnir, they couldn't resist. People collapsed at the fire and ice falling from the sky. The Undead Legion stepped on them, and their necks were sliced by monster portents. Screams in horror could be heard from everywhere. It was like they had landed in the land of the dead. And in the middle of it all, Bahal stood, blankly muttering to himself. How? Authority of the dragon and the power of death. Even just one of these was great enough to turn over the tower. But a guy that controlled both of them. However, like Yin Wu didn't see the need to answer to him, he kicked the ground. Pat, quote exclamation mark exclamation mark exclamation mark quote. Bahal instinctively pulled his body back and pushed his fist forward. And he thought that the fear he felt from Yin Wu was only because of the dragon's strength. He was someone who had just barely won in a battle with a semi-ranker. Considering he was a novice, he was growing fast, but the fact that he had grown this much over that short time didn't make sense. Of course, his body was quite damaged from fighting Gingnir. One arm was gone, and his magic power was depleted. It was so injured that it wouldn't be weird if he just fell to the ground. No, he was almost on the brink of death. It would be dangerous if a higher-ranking ranker appeared. But he didn't think that he would lose to Yin Wu. From Arthea, to when he was Red Dragon's eye. The path he had been walking wasn't easy, and it was all an obstacle and a hurdle for him. So the fire that bloomed from his first when he punched was extremely strong. It was strong enough to burn everything near them to the ground. However, clang, When his fire exploded, Vigrid slipped by and attacked him. Groan. With the shock, Bahal was pushed back. When he barely managed to catch his balance again, his face was filled with disbelief. The shock from earlier definitely wasn't the power of a semi-ranker. At least a ranker. It was the strength of at least a ranker. Because he had never imagined Yin Wu would have this power. Shock and disbelief was clearly shown on his face. And his fire didn't even affect Yin Wu that much. Bahal thought that he had judged something wrong. So he gritted his teeth when Yin Wu followed him and forcefully struck his hand down. It was painful, like it ripped his magic apart, but he didn't have the mind to worry about that. Quack quack wong. Fire rain endlessly poured from the sky. It felt like it was going to swallow Yin Wu up. But, rattle rattle, Yin Wu once again swung Vigrid around and split the fire rain. Every time he did that, holy fire bloomed on the sword's edge and absorbed the leftover magic, and Yin Wu's wings of fire grew bigger. Yin Wu already had the origin of all fire, holy fire. So obviously, Bahal, who used fire magic, couldn't easily touch him. Property-wise, he had the upper hand. So Yin Wu endlessly attacked Bahal to not let go of the upper hand. He activated his cores to the best of his strength, and every time he swung Vigrid, he pushed Bahal into a corner. Clang, clang, shit. Bahal became angrier. He tried to push Yin Wu away, but when he did that, the injuries on his body increased. Fire exploded. Vigrid pushed the fire away to the side and turned directions. Vigrid ripped his left shin. Bahal shook as his muscles were torn apart and fell to the ground on his knees. He didn't even let out a sound and struck his hand down to the ground. Roar, boom, once again, fire rain poured from the sky. Yin Wu thought it might be hard to deal with it with just holy fire this time, so he spread his wings wide and stepped back. He moved, boiling the atmosphere, so he could somewhat smoothly move like they were real wings. He quickly left the spot and the fire rain left the ground charred. Fire rain poured again, like taking the opportunity, and Yin Wu thought it would be difficult to avoid it this time, so he raised his left arm. And Aegis floated up. 5 plates out of the 9 flicked the fire rain away. And they flew away. Yin Wu. Aegis blocked all the fire rain approaching him, flicked them away, and spread them apart. Combat will. Sense strengthening. Now Yin Wu was able to use both skills at the same time like it was a passive skill. His increased thinking abilities deepened his combat will. In the slowed time, Yin Wu was able to focus and make decisions while moving. Sense strengthening gave him even more information after being combined with the senses of a dragon. The countless information appeared in his head and he was able to predict Bahal's next movements. The two skills spun around each other and maximized each other's effects. Thanks to this, Yin Wu blocked the rain fire with Aegis and read the trajectory of his fist to avoid it with his shunpo. Swish. Blessing of the blue spirit temporary. And the present that Abyss Turtle had given him so he could use all the powers of the legendary beasts allowed him to freely use all the blessings of the beasts with his dragon body. From Heaven Wing Mana Control to 8 Extreme Fists. From Magic Circuit to Vigrid. The magic power was supplied everywhere and filled blue holy fire on the sword's edge. Bahal's arms and legs were cut off in an instant. Swish, swish, Vigrid deeply cut Bahal's right side. His ribs all broke and his intestines flowed out. Holy fire entered his body and cut off all his magic power. Of course, Bahal wasn't quietly receiving this treatment. Even if he was on the brink of death, a high ranker was a high ranker. Even if he had the upper hand of the property, the level of his magic power was stronger than Yin Wu's. Every time he exploded his fire and punched out, magic power created a storm around him and continuously injured Yin Wu. His left shoulder broke, and his right thighs were bruised. As his side was cut, blood dripped out. But Yin Wu didn't care about those injuries. Instead, he spread out his wings of fire into the air. Using their fast movements, he repeatedly attacked and pulled out to make Bahal dizzy. With the mind to wound him if Bahal scarred him. His dragonic blood continued to circulate and helped to heal his injuries. His Vigrid split the air. The sound of the atmosphere ripping shattered his eardrums. Chapter 134, Awakening 4. Vigrid continued to strike his side and his remaining right arm was cut off as well. His injury began to get bigger and his entire body was burned. Bahal screamed as his right leg was pierced. Damn, damn. Bahal screamed in fury like he couldn't take it anymore. He squeezed his remaining magic power out and covered Yin Wu in fire. Less than volcano greater than. Bahal activated his signature skill along with fire rain, and a storm of fire spinned around him. However, swoosh, Vigrid was swung along the flaws and made the attack disappear. It flew through the fire and landed in Bahal's chest. Cuck! Bahal's destroyed body crumpled to the ground. His body without any arms or legs flopped around. Gulp! Blood dripped out from his mouth. He hoped for someone to rescue him, but he was able to realize his surroundings. There wasn't anyone around other than Yianwu and him. The monster portents and his undead army had already ended everything. Bahal's and Leonte's best warriors that they brought were all dead and added to his soul collection. That in itself was a great accomplishment for Yianwu. On the other hand, Bahal was trembling in fear. The fact that death was right in front of him was too scary. It was the first time in his entire predatorial life full of victories that he was facing this situation. He wanted to scream for help, but his vocal cords were destroyed. No, he couldn't even make any noise. The moment Yianwu took off his mask on top of Bahal, and his face was revealed. When he saw the coldly smiling face, exclamation mark quote, Bahal's world turned white and he couldn't say anything. It was a face that couldn't exist. Because it should have been a dead face. It was right in front of him. He couldn't ask how he was alive again, how a dead person could come back. Shock, disbelief, and fear. The moment the three emotions filled his eyes, the magic bayonet landed deep in between his eyes. Bahal's strength left his body and he fell backward. With his two eyes wide open. Yianwu slowly sat down on his butt. His body was still warm from the tension. Then he silently closed his eyes. Emotions were turbulently spinning around in his mind. Jungwoo, from the beginning to the end. That's the only thing he could say. And as if responding to Yianwu's emotions, rain started pouring from the sky. The raindrops landed on his shoulders as if patting them to comfort him. Yianwu opened his eyes some time later. His turbulent mind had now settled down. There wasn't any hesitation in his movements when he put his mask back on. Yianwu used Batory's vampiric sword on both Leonte and Bahal. The energy was exchanged into his stats, and their souls were absorbed into the collection of his black bracelet. His black bracelet violently shook. Not only was it filled with Bahal and Leonte, but with all the other clan members of Flame Beast and the guards from Sword God. His collection felt full because of all the skilled players. It felt like they were fighting amongst themselves, but Yianwu didn't care. He knew that they couldn't escape the black bracelet no matter what they did. And I have a lot to ask of them later too. Yianwu was planning to question Bahal and Leonte about the background of this war. Because there might be something he had missed. I should also find out about the use of the stone. Originally, Yianwu wasn't interested in the stone. The fact that the lives of so many players were sacrificed for it turned him off, and he wasn't confident to control it if he used it. But if it was an item special enough for the Red Dragon to go to war, he needed to figure out exactly what it did even if he didn't use it. And also, it was Chirpy's resting area. After that, it would be a healthy supplement for Shannon or Boo. Or he could give it to the monster portents. Yianwu slowly lifted his body. With this, he had clearly finished his goals. He caught Bahal and Leonte, and worsened the fight between Red Dragon and Cheongwado. Whether Red Dragon lost, or Cheongwado was defeated enough to be finished, the damage to both sides were colossal. There wasn't anything Yianwu needed to be involved in anymore. Rather, if he stayed here longer he would be suspected. There were a lot of people within the two clans that he hadn't been able to take care of yet, but being too greedy could put him in danger. It wasn't the time to reveal himself yet. Yianwu pulled out two monster portents and sent them to Fantanadora, along with his message. Tell those two we're pulling out from here. Could this be? The Summer Queen narrowed her eyes instead of pouring out her breath to Sword God, who dared to hold a sword against her. Because she was in her wicked dragon form, it wasn't noticeable. But the Summer Queen was quite surprised right now. Through the draconic contract, she was able to feel the emotions of each of her 81 eyes. She could easily tell where they were. But one of the connections was suddenly cut off. And it was the connection to Bahal, whom she had sent to Leonte. According to the draconic contract, the contractee couldn't cut off the connection of their own will. The 81 eyes were no different to her apostles. But to be cut off meant one thing. It meant Bahal had died. She didn't know what happened. But one thing she did know was that Bahal had been chasing Leonte, and Flame Beast, who had been helping Bahal, had also vanished as well. The location of the stone was now gone. It was a critical damage to her dragon heart, which was on the verge of breaking. So the Summer Queen was angry. She had barely forced herself to come here using magic power that she was extremely lacking. She had gambled, and lost everything. Anger flowed in her, and the sword god was also surprised like the Summer Queen. While he had been controlling his 4 swords, a white bracelet wrapped around his right arm. Gingnir, the sword he had lent Leonte was back. It was an artifact that would always return to its owner, but Sword God hadn't hoped for Gungnir to return. There would only be one reason why it did. Leonte's death. The location of the stone has vanished into thin air. These bastards, until the very end. Under the lion mask, the Sword God's 2 eyes veins popped out. To the Sword God, the red dragon bastards were nothing more than lives that could be ended any time. They announced war, used Saber God to waste the Nidin of the legendary beasts, and now took the stone. With this attack, Cheongwado had suffered too much. Half of their forces were gone, and the 2 of the martial gods were gone. This was the same damage they had taken back in the war with Arthea. Thinking of how much he suffered from that time. No, thinking that the damage this time would be even worse made him feel more angry and frustrated. Everything put aside, he couldn't hold back after knowing that the stone had gone over to the other side. The Sword God decided to use Gingnir. He needed to capture the Summer Queen at the very least to somehow get the stone again. I will release Gingnir now. Please help me. The Sword God expressed his thoughts to Spear God and Bow God. Unlike when Leonte had used it, it would take a long time to properly use Gingnir. The time to use magic power and interfere in the laws took a lot. He was asking for Spear God and Bow God to buy him some time. He didn't get a response, but actions. Spear God pulled out another spear with his left hand from his side. In his right hand, he had a long spear, and in his left hand, he had a short spear and ran to the Summer Queen. He showed off fancy spear work and endlessly attacked Summer Queen to turn her head away. On the other hand, Bow God took the role of guarding them. He flew his arrows so the Summer Queen couldn't attack Spear God or Sword God, and attacked her chest with a strong force. Every time the Spear God swung his spear, the air split around him. With the sound of something breaking, the Summer Queen's body turned into a mess of blood. She managed to avoid some of it with her feet or tail. The Bow God continued to pull his bow and shoot light. Every time the arrows flew out, they split to create tens of strands of light to fly around without a particular direction. And the lights were at thousands. They swirled around Summer Queen and made her dizzy. Spear God gathered the energy to attack her neck. Spear God thought while looking at the strands of light. The skill that the Bow God was using was the skill in the legend that had brought the sun down. The 4 directions archery. That it would be enough to make a hole in the back of Summer Queen's head before Gingnir was completely released. And the light around her started to become condensed and let out heat. Like a new sun had raised in the sky, it let out heat and light below, and exploded at Bow God's command. The long light column split the atmosphere, leaving a fancy artifact that was enough to make someone go blind. And the column was closely passed by the Summer Queen and headed to the Sword God. Sword God, who was focusing everything on releasing Gingnir, wasn't able to block the light column. No, he didn't even expect it to fly in his direction. No one could have expected that the Bow God would suddenly turn. Even the Sword God, he could hold several strategies in his head. Fortunately Sword God was able to instinctively turn his body to avoid it. But he couldn't avoid all of it. His left arm was flung out and completely melted to disappear. The lion mask he was wearing crumbled and a handsome middle-aged face filled with shock was revealed. The magic power he had been gathering for Gingnir scattered away. Bow God, Spear God belatedly realized the situation and screamed. All the questions in his head were being answered now. The reason why Saber God had suddenly become so angry. The person who had told Saber God Leonte had the stone, and placed his son's finger and eye in front of his dead. To think that it was Bow God. But just because the puzzles were in place, there wasn't anything that changed. No, rather, when the Spear God turned to Bow God and looked away from the Summer Queen, he showed a blind spot. The Summer Queen didn't lose the opportunity and swung her tail out like a whip. Quang, the Spear God was lightly flicked away. His body was crumpled and his organs were damaged as well. Blood poured from his mouth. The Summer Queen stretched her head back and gathered strength. Breath, the 5th step of the authority of the dragon. With her will, she gathered the special element, and the power that breathed out the purest and most destructive energy, swept Spear God and Sword God. Spear God was just barely able to squeeze out his magic power to turn the direction of breath away from him and escape. But he still received burns, and his intestines were burnt. He felt a pain like his body was ripping apart. But the spear god threw his body to where sword god was. Sword god collapsed in his location coughing blood. The side effects of 4 directions archery, breath, and the failure to gather magic power for Gingnir. He suffered a lot of internal damage from his magic power circulation. No, it felt like it would explode. The control on his magic power was gone and it tossed around. He had used all his power blocking breath with his 4 swords and fell to the ground. He was in a critical condition, about to lose consciousness any moment. If breath was activated in this situation, everything would really end. No, not you. Spear god couldn't let that happen. Sword god was Cheongwado's center and king. And he was the savior that had brought him out to this big world from his small net. Also, they were irreplaceable friends. Although others judged him for being cruel and indifferent, Spear god couldn't stand still and watch his friend die. Even if he died here. So Spear god clenched his teeth. All his bones were broken into pieces, and his spine was broken, so it was a wonder he was able to move. No, to be able to walk was strange. But Spear god used everything he had to run. He supported the falling sword god and told him they should escape. That if that sword god could live. If only he could survive. Cheongwado could rise again. Also, when he had first made the decision to leave the one-horned tribe with sword god, he thought he could achieve their dream that they had. Spear god believed in that, and put all the remaining life force he had for it. Stop them, using whatever means. At the spear god's desperate shout, Cheongwado's players all ran at the Summer Queen. Even if they were fighting against someone, or they were about to collapse because their magic power was depleted. They turned the direction of the swords and used their skills on the Summer Queen. Thousands of players challenged the Summer Queen like they were moths drawn to a flame. To somehow earn some time, they faithfully followed the spear god's last orders so spear god and sword god could somehow escape. You dare, these microbes dare. The Summer Queen was angered at the fact that these mere players turned their swords at her and sprayed her breath again. She couldn't let the location of the stone disappear with the sword god and spear god. If she lost them, she didn't know when she could find the stone. Hundreds of players were melted. Amongst them were rankers as well. Move, I said move. The Summer Queen furiously tried to chase after the 2 martial gods, but she was held back because of the moths and couldn't move forward. Meanwhile, Spear God continued to run and run holding Sword God. Chapter 135, Hatch 1. The Summer Queen, who was being blocked by Cheongwado. Red Dragon, who was trying to chase after Sword God. Bow God, who was trying to escape. In the middle of that mess, the Foreign Legion felt like they were in real danger. The Summer Queen's unfocused rage was hurting everyone. A dragon that wasn't in its right mind was fear-inducing. Except for a few mercenaries who wanted to stay until the very end to get the reward, most of them had already left the battlefield. Among them were Fant and Adora. Hyungnim, is it really okay to do this? Fant scratched his face looking at the battlefield far away. He came because Yi and Wu said they should leave. But he felt uncomfortable just leaving like this. Although he liked to run around without caring about the consequences, he knew that a contract was important. And in these cases, the binding proclamation always followed. Binding proclamation. It was a magic contract that made the one who didn't follow through with the conditions suffer greatly. Fortunately, Yi and Wu wasn't tied to the binding proclamation. The information he had brought them was incredible, and also because they felt uncomfortable with the fact that Fant and Adora were the Martial King's children. So with that, there was only a light binding between them. However, this could be a problem if the other party chose to press charges. But Yi and Wu shook his head as if saying they shouldn't worry. No, we won't have to worry that far. Red Dragon will be grateful that you guys left it at this. Fante's eyes became bigger. What's that mean? The one-horned tribe didn't appear at this attack. Fant tilted his head like he still didn't understand. But Yi and Wu no longer answered, like he was annoyed, and silently climbed down the hill. Adora sighed and gave a further explanation. During this attack, why do you think our tribe didn't show up? Because the portal suddenly happy. But now that I think about it, they should have been contacted by now. Fant tilted his head like something was strange. As far as he knew, his tribe liked situations like this. They went crazy for the chance to make a chaotic area even more chaotic. Especially the Martial King. Also, even though there was quite a distance between Cheongwado's base and Kurum, if a teleport scroll was used, they could request for support right away. But the one-horned tribe didn't show up even until the end. Even during this revolution occurring in Cheongwado. I'm not sure, but father probably thinks there's no point in the alliance and cancelled it. And Red Dragon could have sent one of their people to the tribe too. Fante's eyebrow twitched. To not interfere, not sure about the specifics. But they probably wouldn't have said it that directly. Because Red Dragon can't take out tribe too lightly. Wouldn't they have said something like, please change your judgment according to how the situation pans out, or something like that? Since once father's pride is touched, it ends up in ruins. Ah, I guess that could have happened. Even after Red Dragon controlled all of Kurum, as much as they didn't touch the tribe, that was how much they cared about them. The lofty Red Dragon, since they were taking careful steps with the tribe, they could have influenced the outcome of this battle. No, Adora was absolutely sure they did. So Red Dragon will be glad that we left on our own accord. Since they don't have to care anymore. No, to be exact, since they don't have to care about the tribe. The war with Cheonwado was now close to being over. Since they would need to take some time to recuperate, they probably wanted to avoid the tribe. And Bahal, who had been in charge of them, died. Adora kept those words at the tip of her tongue but didn't speak them. Also, it was clear to her eyes that the panicked Summer Queen's dragon heart was critically sparkling, like it was going to break any second. Politics. It's so hard. Why is it so complicated? They should all just live simply. Phew. Fant rubbed the side of his eyes like he was getting a migraine. Adora grinned looking at her brother. You don't have to make it so complicated. Since in the end, politics is just made up of one thing. If you become king, you only have to follow that. What's that? Fant curiously looked at his little sister. Adora firmly nodded her head. Her eyes were following Yin Wu, who was already far along down the hill. Power. Even her voice carried strength. You can do anything if you have power. Anything. Yin Wu and the siblings didn't stray from the path and headed straight back to Kurum. The one-horned tribe was already getting ready to leave. Oh, you're back, son, daughter. The martial king carelessly raised his hand looking at Fant and Adora. The other tribe members greeted them and began to move busily again. Yin Wu, who was blankly standing behind them, asked with his head tilted. You're not accepting my greeting? The martial king crossed his arms and snorted. Nope, why would I need greetings from a guy that lives however he wants? Did you come back after making a good mess? Yin Wu indifferently nodded his head. Yes, thanks to you. The martial king looked Yin Wu up and down with an unsatisfied gaze. He met Yin Wu's eyes and smirked. Did you stuff yourself with something good again? How come you always return so differently than when you left? Your physique seems to have changed too. You even smell different. Fant had a face that looked as if it was asking, again. And Adora nodded her head seeing Yin Wu with her insight. Yin Wu inwardly clicked his tongue. He had hit it as well as he could this time as well. He covered his dragon scales, and tried to tone down his draconic attribute. But the martial king's perceptive gaze didn't miss anything, like always. I'll explain to you later. Sure, whatever, but if you have something good, you should share, and not hog it all to yourself. Yin Wu scratched his face with his thumb. His expression couldn't be seen past his mask, but the martial king's scolding felt strange to him. To be honest, Yin Wu felt a bit embarrassed standing in front of the martial king like nothing had happened. Before he left the tribe, the scolding he received from the martial king was still clear in his head. It was just a little, no a lot, cringy. But it wasn't a bad feeling. Like when he met Heneva and Phoenix for the same time. It was a feeling like he had somewhere to come back to. The word, home, fit best. The martial king waved his hand for them to leave like he wouldn't rebuke them any longer. As Yin Wu was about to leave. But, he paused and turned towards where the martial king was. What you were doing, did it end well? Yin Wu silently stood there for a second. The question the martial king had asked him was somehow strange. It felt like he was asking about something other than avenging the phoenix. And so, Yin Wu bowed his head. Thanks to you. Really, then that's good. The martial king no longer asked any questions and focused on what he was doing. Yin Wu stared at the martial king for a moment and quietly left. The one-horned tribe headed back to outside of the tower. Yin Wu was able to listen to what happened following behind them. The first one was that like he and Adora had suspected, Red Dragon and Cheonwado's parties had both come to the 11th floor. The reason was also as he suspected. Red Dragon came to ask the tribe if they could reconsider joining the battle if the gap between the wins and losses were big, because Red Dragon was going to attack Cheonwado. Cheonwado came to continue with the alliance, and pleaded for help considering the relationship between Martial King and the Sword God and Spear God. And apparently, the Martial King just said one word to them. Nope. He judged that Cheonwado had lost the qualification to stand side by side next to the one-horned tribe in the war, and he had only helped them because the Spear God had pledged to give up his horn. The reason he cancelled the alliance was because he didn't see the need to continue supporting Cheonwado, who kept on losing. In addition, the Sword God was indeed his disciple, but it had been long since they cut ties, and he didn't have the reason or loyalty to help Spear God, because he was no longer a member of the tribe. Yi Yanwu shook his head hearing about the Martial King's response. Rather than being amazed at his rejection, he only felt that he was cold. And seeing his ability to separate work and personal life, Yi Yanwu saw a new side to the Martial King. He thought this might be the reason for the one-horned tribe's newfound success. And he also continued to have thoughts. He might be receiving the grace of the Martial King right now, but no one knew what would happen once their relationship was completely ruined. Thinking back to how he almost cut ties with the Martial King, he realized he was quite lucky. And that the Martial King had cut him a lot of slack. Also, I can't expect any more of that slack anymore. The Martial King was someone who was able to kick Yi Yanwu to the curb without hesitation if he posed a threat to the tribe. And the second was the chase after Cheonwado and Red Dragon. The escape of Spear God and Sword God was successful. But because they had been gravely injured, Red Dragon created different teams to chase after them. And some high rankers in the attacking forces were targeting after the island that Cheonwado's headquarters were. It's because of the stone. They must want to look in every nook and cranny of Cheonwado for it. Although they won't find anything. It was clear that for a while, Red Dragon would waste time looking for the stone. Meanwhile, the Spear God and Sword God completely disappeared. It was like they weren't in the tower anymore. The same went for the Cheonwado players who barely kept their lives after the battle. They spread out individually. Some of them dreamed about raising up a revolution for Cheonwado, but it was quickly smashed by Red Dragon. Now, even saying the word Cheonwado was strictly forbidden. And so, most of them spread out to other clans. The most loyal ones decided to wait for the Martial God's return. But Red Dragon didn't let them hide themselves. They followed after to ask about the location of the two Martial Gods, and if they didn't know, they were immediately killed. The genocide of the survivors was being continued. In the end, there was only one thing they wanted. Cheonwado completely fell. With the sudden collapse of one of the 8 clans, cracks started to appear all over the tower. Other large clans extended their hand to take Cheonwado's authority. A lot of medium clans spread their wings apart to become the next Cheonwado. The confrontation between Red Dragon and Cheonwado caused great confusion. Also, Yi Yanwu looked at the changing world within the tower and once again prepared for what he needed to do. There's a lot. I have to get used to the dragon body again. And I have to organize the authorities of the dragon that I got. One thing he had definitely learned after fighting Bahal was that he still had a long way to go. The potential of the dragon body was unknown. Because he didn't fully understand how to use it yet. He needed to fix that, and get used to using the authorities. He needed to quickly learn everything. Other than that, there were still a lot. His egg that hadn't hatched yet. The quest of the Abyss Turtle. Questioning Leonte and Bahal. Investigation about both of them. Training his 8 extreme fists. And he needed to start climbing the floors again. They were all difficult tasks. So Yi Yanwu prioritized them in the guest room of the One-Horned Tribe. And an order was created. First, waking up the egg. But he needed the seed of the moon from the One-Horned Tribe to wake it up. And that was gone now after he rejected the Martial King's quest. Of course, there was still a way. Blessing of the 4 legendary beasts. Yi Yanwu spread his hands out. Flare. Above his hands were holy fire, void, abyss, and white earth. The 4 different energies freely mixed together. It was a substance created from the beast's powers. With this, as he had tried the first time, wouldn't it be enough to completely wake up egg up? Chapter 136, Hatch 2. Yi Yanwu, Fant, and Adora headed to the elders' room in the center. The egg was still being taken care of by the elders. Apparently they didn't leave it out of their sight. They were curious about how it would look. So they entered when the elders' room was. Why are the elders being like that? I don't know. Yi Yanwu tilted his head and Fant and Adora turned away like they were embarrassed. The elders all had red bandanas wrapped around their heads and were all lying down together holding each other's hands. Don't take the egg. A new legendary beast might be born. More research is needed, so give us more time. Yeah, of course. It's still too early. You even finished the trial of the 11th floor already. Allow us to look into it a bit more. No, all that aside, you don't even have the seed of the moon yet. How are you gonna wake it up? If you still want to wake it up, you will have to do it over our dead bodies. Quote. They couldn't see his face because of the mask, but Yi and Wu had an extremely surprised face right now. Was it because I denied their request yesterday? Last night, Yi and Wu had told them beforehand that he would come to take the egg back. And that he was going to hatch it soon. The Council of Elders requested for more time. Even the head elder, who normally didn't speak up, asked himself. Adding on that since they had uncovered new things, couldn't they have some more time? Actually, Yi and Wu didn't need to worry about it that much. It had been a while since he finished the trial of the 11th floor. It was more comfortable to leave it with the tribe since he didn't know when it might wake up. However, Yi and Wu was able to read some of the egg's thoughts with his connection to it. That it wanted to wake up. No, to be more precise. Like it wants to tell me something. Not communication through the connection, but it felt like it wanted to see for itself. Thinking about how in the past it only woke up and started crying when it was hungry, this was a huge development. Like it had suddenly grown up. It seemed like it had internally developed a lot. From when had he felt this way? After getting the Needon of the mythical dragon back. Thinking about it, he looked down at the elders again. The elders were still unmoving, lying on the ground. The egg must have been nice for the elders to get rid of their curiosity. Apparently, through different experiments and tests, they had discovered a lot of facts about mythical beasts' eggs that they didn't know before. And one of them was the fact that Yi and Wu's egg was a legendary beast's egg. So for the elders, who had to amuse themselves by making new mugongs, it was a shame that the egg was being taken away from them. They said as you got older, your mentality became younger. It was exactly this. It seemed it would take an eternity for them to get up. Yi and Wu just stood there and thought about what to do with them. Adora glanced over at Yi and Wu and tried to reason with the elders. But, Master, should I blow these kids away? Chirpy read Yi and Wu's thoughts and landed on his shoulder. After Yi and Wu awakened his dragon body, Chirpy was influenced as well and he was a bit bigger. Oh ho, isn't that a bird? I did hear the child of the phoenix absorb the soul of the saber-toothed tiger. I see that's how a legendary beast looks when it's developed. But its appearance is definitely different than recorded, perhaps affected by his owner. Black stripes. I must take note of this. It can be used to see how much he continues to grow in the future. Then on this side, the elders had rushed over with sparkling eyes. The passion to observe him closer could be seen. These guys are weird. Can't I blow them away? Chirpy became surprised, then scared. Yi and Wu nodded. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, got it. Chirpy spread his wings apart. The elders who were exclaiming in delight soon flew away like autumn leaves blowing away in the wind. Humph, acting out. Yi and Wu heard Chirpy's cute complaints and smiled, leaving the room. Fant and Adora followed him, shaking their heads. Adora still couldn't raise her head, embarrassed. They soon arrived at the location where Yi and Wu's egg was located, and flung the door open. Inside, the head elder paused writing down something to push up his glasses and look at them. You're here. The elders must have made quite a fuss. The elders were looking inside with painful faces from the doorframe. However, they weren't able to come in because of the sharp glare from the head elder. They said the head elder was the second in power after the martial god. No, everyone other than the martial god was scared of him. It was clear the rumors were correct. I'll talk to them for you at a later time. It's fine. It wasn't that bad. Is this the guy? Yi and Wu nodded his head at the egg next to the head elder. It was bigger than when he last saw it. It was over 4 meters tall, and it had become wider as well, almost as big as the wall. The patterns on its surface were much clearer as well. They looked like green and black spotted on like a crocodile, but there was a certain order to it. Will it get angry if I say it looks like a watermelon? Yi and Wu, thinking pointless thoughts, asked the head elder. If I wake this guy up, how big will it be? If it's crunched up inside. It depends on the thickness of the body, but it'll easily surpass 5 meters. Then I should wake it up outside. I'll be grateful for that. And those useless people out there will get a look too. Yi and Wu nodded and lightly waved a hand in the air. When he did that, a shadow extended itself and wrapped around the egg to lift it up. Oh ho, The head elder shined his eyes at the appearance of the monster portents that were different from the soul familiars. While it emanated the aura of the undead, it was different from the normal undead, so he wanted to check it closer. Yi and Wu took the egg outside to the courtyard. He heard the elders complain, but he ignored them and spoke with the head elder. While you were gone, I found out some more stuff about the egg. First, I think we're sure that it's a legendary beast. It's strong and tough, and its dormant skills are quite developed. Especially the anti-magic power part. Yi and Wu's eyes sparkled. Anti-magic power meant that its resistance to general magic power was outstanding. It was definitely a plus since it was able to be free from magic power. However, that also meant that buffs or magic of that kind didn't work on it. But if it was tough, it could physically overcome those cons. But I can't tell its property or how it looks for the life of me. I know that something sturdy is inside, but it's hard to know more than that. Every time I try to check, I get flicked out because of the anti-magic power. The head elder said this was the first time this happened to him. There were only 4 legendary beasts that the public knew. And they all had special properties and authorities to control. So it made sense that the legendary beast inside the egg had properties. Actually, that's the reason why the elders are telling you not to hatch the egg yet. If you wake up the egg because it looks like it's finished but it's not, then it means we'll have forced it up, and that's not good. The elders who were following him all nodded. You could see in their eyes that they wanted him to change his mind. It's time to wake it up. Because it's crying out that it wants to leave now. Yi and Wu cut away their hopes instantly. The elders despaired at the fact that they couldn't change his mind anymore. The head elder just nodded his head without any emotion. If that's what the master says, it must be right. But how are you going to wake it up? You don't have the seed of the moon. I've thought of a way. Then it's fine, but just in case, take this. The head elder dug around his pocket and tossed something in the air. Yi and Wu quickly caught it and was surprised. You have successfully completed the sudden quest participation in war. You have earned 5,000 karma. Affinity with the one-horned tribe has increased by 150 with the reward. You have earned enough trust to be considered a member of the tribe. You have earned Seed of the Moon as a reward. You have earned the qualification to earn the Legendary Beast Gratitude as an additional reward. Please request it of the Martial King. Seed of the Moon. Category: Miscellaneous item. Rank: A++. Summary: a holy seed that has grown after receiving the energy of the moon in a cave after a long time. After being prepared, it can be consumed as an outstanding supplement. This. Yi and Wu's eyes became bigger. Even though he had participated in the war on the Red Dragon's side. Since Fant and Adora are a part of the same tribe. Pardon, Yi and Wu asked in rebuttal. The head elder lightly laughed, as if amused. The two are one-horned tribe members. And royal members. Since they were with you, you didn't fail the quest. Yi and Wu realized what he was saying and bitterly smiled. He had used the loophole in the system. If the result of the quest wasn't clear, then the person who gave it could determine if it was successful or not. Just think of it as a present for taking good care of Fant and Adora. With my authority, giving away a root is nothing, so don't worry. Of course, if the king knows, he'll throw a tantrum saying that he wants it too, so keep it a secret. The head elder waved his hand, as if it was nothing, and glared at the other elders. As if saying they should watch out if they told. Chapter 137, Hatch 3. The elders all had surprised faces and shut up. Well, personally, as a scholar, I'm also curious how a legendary beast hatches. Thank you. Yi and Wu was genuinely grateful and slightly bowed his head. And he was also curious about what the legendary beast gratitude was. Just by the name, it seemed to be a healthy supplement for a mythical beast or a legendary beast. The head elder waved his hand again. But under his glasses, his two eyes flashed, as if he was very curious as to what would happen in the future. Chirpy, I want to see my friend quickly. Yi and Wu stroked Chirpy under the chin and looked around. As if the news that he was going to hatch his egg soon had already spread out, the elders were surrounded by tribe members. Actually, Yi and Wu's egg was the greatest object of interest of the tribe these days. They had never seen an egg like it before. A few of them placed bets on what would hatch on the egg. The Martial King had appeared at some point and nodded his head with his arms crossed as if telling them to begin. Yi and Wu shook his head like it couldn't be helped. And he turned his head to focus. Back to when he had first met it. The egg's thoughts that were delivered to him were clearer. Its thoughts and emotions were divided when being delivered to him. Fortunately, Yi and Wu felt like he knew what exactly it was. And why it had pushed back being hatched all this time. It wasn't simply because he hadn't been able to eat Yi and Wu's dreams. It wasn't time yet to hatch. Yes, the fellow wasn't waiting to hatch, but to resurrect. After a long time, it was waiting for the lost pieces to return to him. And he had trusted that it would return to him. That Yi and Wu would find it for him. And that piece was Needin of the mythical dragon. It was in Yi and Wu's right hand. Yi and Wu clenched the seed of the moon in his hand. He input the power of the 4 legendary beasts into it. The holy fire was absorbed first, and then the void and abyss covered it. And lastly, white clay surrounded it and hardened the seed. When he spread his hand out, the seed of the moon floated into the air. This time, Yi and Wu spread out his left hand. Gold energy swiveled around like a spider web and it made the shape of a round bead. Needin of the mythical dragon. Less than half of it was left because Leonte activated Gingnur, but the nucleus was left. The Needin floated into the as well and combined with the seed of the moon. As a white substance and gold energy mixed, a strange rainbow substance was created. The substance entered through the egg's pores. The egg trembled, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Its surface sparked. And, crack, the shell started to crack. Tiny cracks combined together and fell apart. And at the top, a head roughly popped out. Rough orange scales and golden eyes. It looked similar to the Summer Queen's real form that he saw in the battlefield, but upon closer inspection, it was actually different. It looked different from the Void Dragon as well. It looked a lot like the dragon decorations from the East back on Earth. Quote. Mythical dragon, Adora muttered like she couldn't believe, and all of the One-Horn tribe members widened their eyes. But amidst all that, Yi and Wu silently looked at the guy with golden eyes. His eyes shifted like waves. I've been waiting for you to call me name again. Crack KK. The hatching continued. The shell fell in pieces like marble tiles. Orange scales and bumps could be seen. And he shook his body and completely cracked the egg. He stood up and flew out. Boom. He had a long body like a snake. With horns that looked like deer horns and amphibious eyes, he stretched his body out and slid down to surround Yi and Wu. His scales were standing out. And as the moisture on his body completely disappeared, they hardened, making them wonder if he had really just hatched. His scales flashed and settled down. Black colors occasionally appeared here and there. It was completely different from a dragon. It looked a lot like the most superior mythical beast, the mythical dragon, but when you looked closer, there were a lot of disparities from the rumored mythical dragon. Adora and Fant felt like Yi and Wu's mythical beast was familiar. Adora, yeah, right, it looks like Akasha's snake too. Albeit a bit different. Why were the two reminded of Akasha's snake that they had met in the tutorial? It could have borrowed the form on the snake after seeing it in Yi and Wu's unconsciousness, as fitting of a mythical beast that grew on their owner's dreams. Also, he exuded an aura that was heavy and sharp rather than the holy and noble aura that a mythical dragon was said to exude. Demonic energy. Actually, magic energy was completely different from other energies. It could create other energies as much as it wanted, but demonic energy was more fundamental than others. The power that the demons on the 98th floor used. Demonic energy was corrupted and evil, but it also had offensive powers that were as strong. So there were a lot of players who liked the demonic energy. The prime example was the Devil Army of the 8 Clans. A mythical beast on the level of a legendary beast that had demonic energy. It was more appropriate to call this a magical beast. No one in the One-Horn tribe had seen such a magical beast on the 11th floor. The strength it emanated was extraordinary. Although it felt a bit weak since it had just hatched. The potential was so outstanding that it could bloom into a fancy flower anytime. The fact that it had the energy of all the 4 legendary beasts was interesting. The 4 different kinds of energy were smoothly circulating under the demonic energy. 600 years ago, something similar had happened, but it was the result of ones who had passed the tests of the legendary beasts. Now, it had combined the foundation of the legendary beasts. Accomplishment-wise, it wasn't even comparable to last time. After the creation of the tower, and in the future, it was something that couldn't and wouldn't be done. The elders were just grateful that this happened in front of them and they were able to see it up close. They stared at it with their eyes wide open in case they missed something. A few rushed over to the archives and tried to search for records of anything similar to this. It's completely opposite to a mythical beast. So would the name magical dragon fit it better? The head elder looked at Yi and Wu, who was conversing with the magical dragon, and pushed his glasses up. He couldn't hear what they were saying because of the defensive mechanism made of magic power, but they seemed affectionate. Also, the Martial King's eyes seemed calm for some reason. As soon as the magical dragon woke up, Yi and Wu surrounded themselves with magic power. In the past, rankers would have easily been able to eavesdrop on them, but after waking his draconic energy, he was able to create a defense that was like a fortress. The reason why he did this was simple. So his conversation with the guy was leaked out. No, to be exact, he didn't want to let anyone listen. At first, he was hesitant. Because the mythical dragon should definitely have died. The mythical dragon was almost as powerful as a legendary beast. It could easily consume all properties, and had the skills for several fighting methods. That was the reason why the tower was so loud at the time when rumors that his brother had awakened the mythical dragon spread. Also, it was the reason why Calidus took an interest in his brother. But as strong as the mythical dragon was, there were several restrictions that came with it. It was the fact that it was a manifestation of the owner who woke it up. People were all born with personalities in their unconsciousness. The mythical dragon was the form of one of them. So, according to the situation, it could freely change forms, and it usually followed the character of their owner. Sometimes, it locked itself in the owner's unconsciousness. And this was obvious, but if their original form disappeared, they would also disappear. So Yi and Wu definitely thought that his brother's mythical dragon would have closed its eyes somewhere. And because Leonte had its Nidin, he was even more sure. Even when the aura of the mythical dragon was exuded from the egg, he just thought they were of the same property or it was the same species. But when he broke the egg and woke up, Yi and Wu had to fold all other thoughts. It was quite different from the appearance in the diary, but its aura was the same. Just what had happened. I've been waiting a long time. In a deep place. I threw my physical body away and locked myself in darkness for your return. The magical dragon's eyes were drowned in sorrow, sadness and hate, but also happiness to meet. You told me to leave. You even cut our connection so I could live apart from you, but I believed that you would come back. Thankfully, you didn't betray my faith. It's a relief. Yi and Wu felt a sense of incompatibility from the magical dragon's words. He had thought so when he said, return, but the dragon wasn't looking at him. He was looking at his brother through him. Say something. It's been a while. You would have been jumping around if you were like your old self, but why are you so silent now? Quote. Well, I guess if you went through those things it wouldn't be weird for your personality to change. But what happened all this time? Your disposition changed a lot. The magical dragon looked Yi and Wu up and down, moving here and there around him. So my new body is different. But anyways, say something. It's frustrating. Yi and Wu was trapped in his thoughts. He didn't know how, but this guy had waited for his brother to return and went in a deep sleep. And he was lost at what to say to this excited fellow. Sorry, I'm not who you're looking for. What are? The magical dragon's eyes widened. Yi and Wu didn't reply for a moment, and pulled back his magic power around him. And he spoke to the Martial King. Seasongnam, I want to say something to this child. Would it be okay to take my leave for a moment? The Martial King nodded. The elders all widened their eyes in surprise because they were hoping to observe the magical dragon from next to it. But Yi and Wu ignored the elders, desperate pleas, and stepped on Shunpo to quickly leave. Chirpy followed right after him, saying that they should go together. The magical dragon tilted his head in confusion, and flew up into the air with his face hardened. It looked like he was freely swimming in the water. The magical dragon followed Yi and Wu to an isolated forest located far away from the village. Once Yi and Wu spread his senses around and saw that there wasn't any around, he stood on the highest tree near him. What are you talking about? Why, you're not you. Yi and Wu took off the mask he was wearing. He thought it was because of the magic that was on the mask that made the magical dragon confused. The magical dragon looked at Yi and Wu and tilted his head. The same face as before. His bright aura was a lot colder now, but that wasn't strange considering what he had been through. But the magical dragon observed Yi and Wu carefully, and his tilted head was fixed upright. His questioning eyes shook, and he suddenly frowned. Demonic energy flew around him. A low growling voice escaped his lips. Who are you? Yi and Wu answered with a composed face. Yi and Wu. Yian. Wu. The magical dragon wrinkled his forehead. His head felt itchy like he was about to remember something. And his eyes had to become bigger at what Yi and Wu said. Jung Wu's older brother. Opening square bracket .. exclamation mark closing square bracket. Like time had paused. The stiff magical dragon couldn't say anything. I don't if you heard, but Jungwoo and I are twins. That's why our faces are the same. The reason why I came here is to get the guys that hurt Jungwoo. Yeonwoo started to speak about the things between his brother and himself. The misunderstanding in the past. What he experienced entering the tower, everything. And the magical dragon was able to receive all of Yeonwoo's memories through the connection. Opening square bracket closing square bracket. The magical dragon was silent. His shaking eyes seemed confused, like he was greatly shocked. He probably needed some time alone. Yeonwoo left so the magical dragon could organize his thoughts. Opening square bracket Then, the reason why you are here is to get rid of all the guys from back then. 1 hour had passed when the magical dragon spoke up. Like he had had a lot of thoughts, his eyes were calmly settled down now. The golden eyes that symbolized mythical dragons were filled with a certain madness. Like he would stand by him to chew and swallow all the bastards that had made his owner that way. For now, the magical dragon growled, baring his teeth, like he didn't like Yeonwoo's answer. He looked like he was going to attack him any second. If possible, I'm going to break the tower as well. Then, I'll be slightly less angrier. What? Ha ha, ha ha ha, the magical dragon laughed as if amused by something. The madness in his eyes quickly disappeared. Instead, they were filled with light. Demonic energy fizzled around and shook the atmosphere. With this, it was possible to know how strong he was. You're crazy. Well, I guess you would have to be that crazy for me to work with you. Definitely, I think I'll be able to do that. The magical dragon smirked. New master, I want to follow you. Will you accept me? Of course, Yeonwoo nodded his head. With the magical dragon, his brother had been able to become stronger rapidly. Although this was the cause of jealousy from even his teammates. But the power of the magical dragon was real. And he even had the power of the 4 legendary beasts. It was only potential, since he had just hatched, but these restrictions could easily be swept away if he grew. With a guy like him, and Chirpy, Shannon, Boo, and other monster portents, he would be able to finish his revenge. Slowly, but surely. Then, give me a new name. Since I was reborn, and have to do new things, I need a new name to bind myself to you. Yeonwoo spoke after some thought. Chapter 138, Hatch 4. Yeonwoo quickly returned after his conversation with the magical dragon. What about the magical dragon? He's resting because it's only been a while since he was hatched. Yeonwoo could feel the heavy feeling near his heart. Like Chirpy, the stone was quietly sleeping. Chirpy was excited to be able to finally play with his friend. Adora, yes, is my naming sense that bad? Adora stayed silent. Did something happen? I gave him a name and he angrily denied making a contract with me. But he said that he wouldn't leave, so I should slowly think about a name. Then he would accept the contract. Adora awkwardly scratched her cheek. Somehow, it was obvious what had happened. What did you try to name him? Growl. Adora unconsciously smacked her forehead. Roar. What about Roar? No, did you see his majestic appearance earlier? That's totally a bellow, or screech. I vote for Snarl. From some time, the one-horned tribe was all disordered. It was after Yeonwoo had hatched his magical dragon. After they heard the name Yeonwoo gave him was harshly rejected, they were all having a good time trying to name him. Tisk tisk. Fighting 24/7 has left all your wit in the trash. Then what about you? Do you have a good name? Of course. What is it? Butterfly. These names should be noticeable right away. Hey, don't laugh. The tribe members couldn't agree. Naming is so hard. When I woke up my mythical beast on the 11th floor, I struggled for a long time to name it. But it's a magical dragon. Not a mythical dragon, or anything like that. We should give it something that fits it. The existence of a magical dragon was a first for the one-horned tribe, who had a long history. A legendary beast rank animal that also had the strength of a magical beast. It reminded them of Akasha's snake from the tutorial, although it was definitely stronger than it. So the one-horned tribe wanted to give the first magical dragon a fitting name. They all put their minds together. But actually, the one-horned tribe were only interested in fighting and becoming stronger. They didn't care at all about other things. Grunt. To be honest, I like Roar. You too. Yeah, nothing comes close to it. Everyone agrees. Then should we ask Kane to offer the name again? There's no way a better name could come up. Adora grasped her forehead listening to them all. She sighed. To think that they were called the strongest tribe in the tower that was filled with both brains and muscle. It was an embarrassing day. Eventually, they decided to pick the name after more thought. Because every time he said a name, the magical dragon just replied with a sigh. Opening square bracket ... At first I thought you were joking. But you actually like these names. Ha, think more. Master, how would you feel if I called you, Goo Goo Gaga, or, Cha Gai? That's now I feel. Think some more. The magical dragon complained like he didn't even have the energy to be annoyed anymore, and he fell asleep in the stone. Was it because it had only been a while since he had finished hatching? The magical dragon needed time to digest the power of the 4 legendary beasts. While he was doing that, Yi and Wu thought of more names. Yi and Wu gripped his head thinking of more names and almost gave up. It was obvious whatever he thought of, the magical dragon would brush off. Then he needed time to slowly think. He also thought of calling his name back to when he was a mythical dragon. But the magical dragon had said he didn't like that. To Yi and Wu, who had never even had any pets, this was a hard task. Although he couldn't consider the mythical beast a pet. So Yi and Wu moved on to his next order of business. Finding the successor of the Abyss Turtle. Yi and Wu popped open the quest the Abyss Turtle had left him in the quest category. Hidden Quest: The Abyss Turtle's Test. Summary: the Abyss Turtle is looking at you, who is performing the test of the Phoenix and the Void Dragon, with interest. And they wish to give you a test. The Abyss Turtle is looking for someone to carry out their revenge rather than do it themselves. Please look for a mystical beast worthy of becoming their successor and turn them into a legendary beast. Rewards: 1. A piece of the turtle head's back. 2. Shedding of the tail snake. 3. The hybrid Abyss Turtle always regretted not being able to leave a descendant. So they left a quest to make a successor for them. But this quest had the difficulty of trials that could be found on the 30th to 40th floors. If it was that easy to make a legendary beast, everyone would have made one. The legendary beast was the symbol of the tower. Making something like that was near impossible. Of course, the quest wasn't to make one that was similar to the Abyss Turtle. Since all he had to do was put a guy that had the same qualifications as it. But that was also hard. He could easily solve the problem, since he had Chirpy and the magical dragon. However, if I told them to separate from me, they'll try to eat me up first. No, I wouldn't even consider that in the first place. In the end, there was only one method. Forcefully making one. Thankfully, there was a method. And it smoothly progressed. When he told this truth to Fant and Adora, they easily agreed, saying they would help. So what you're trying to say is that you want to make our mythical beasts that'll hatch into a legendary beast. Right, if it's a mythical beast that grew using your dreams, it'll have that much potential. And if I share the legendary beast's power, it'll definitely qualify. Yi and Wu was planning on sharing the combined power of the legendary beasts like he had with the magical dragon. Also, if I give over the Bead of Abyss and legendary beast Conjunctiva as well. The Bead of Abyss was a reward he had received after completing Void Dragon's quest, and the legendary beast Conjunctiva was a reward the head elder had given along with the Seed of the Moon. Both were excellent materials. The Bead of Abyss was outstanding for making an artifact, and the legendary beast Conjunctiva allowed Chirpy and magical dragon to grow. But Yi and Wu decided to let both of these go. Since he had already absorbed the power of the legendary beasts, the Bead of Abyss didn't really help them. Rather, it was better to use the other reward, Wrath of the Void Dragon, as a protecting device. Same with the legendary beast Conjunctiva. Chirpy and the magical dragon hadn't completely absorbed their powers yet, and giving them too much power could make them worse. More than anything, if I make a successor for all the legendary beasts, how many rewards and karma will I get? During this time when the 4 legendary beasts guarding the 11th floor were down, and when the other stronger mythical beasts were gone, it took a long time to resurrect the legendary beasts. During that time, the life on the 11th floor would become a mess. Since they were the pillar of order. So Yi and Wu planned on giving on the roles of the 4 legendary beasts to the legendary beast that would be born. He would be able to accomplish something no one else had. From what I saw about new accomplishments, it gave rewards matching the effort. Then this time won't be too different either. Yi and Wu stroked his chin. No one had done anything like this before, so he couldn't even imagine what kind of reward he would get. But, there was one thing he was sure of. It will be at least as strong as when I entered the treasury of Olympus. Yi and Wu barely calmed his excited mind down. Moreover, if this succeeded, he wouldn't just get rewards or karma. Having the legendary beast of the 11th floor in his hands was the same thing as owning the 11th floor. The world where mythical beasts, magical beasts, and legendary beasts lived. The world of the myths. He couldn't fully comprehend it yet, but being able to completely control a floor would be hugely beneficial to him. Yi and Wu only spoke about a part of these thoughts. But it was enough. The Fant siblings hadn't finished their trial on the 11th floor yet. They could earn a lot of karma, so they had no reason to refuse. And the one-horned tribe showed a lot of interest as well. Especially the head elder, who liked it because there was a new research object. Saying it was incredible watching the magical dragon hatch, and that it would be overwhelming to watch the creation of a legendary beast. It became so loud and chaotic that one would have thought the Council of Elders were going to relocate to the 11th floor. A few of them even tried naming the new legendary beast. And looking at the noisy village, Yi and Wu chuckled, and moved on to his next plan. Chapter 139, Hatch 5. Yi and Wu made up an excuse and said that he would go training to leave the village. What he was about to do had to be done as secretly and carefully as possible. Also, it was the moment he had most been waiting for. Now all that's left is to grill Leonte and Bahal. Yi and Wu wondered how they were doing in his collection of about 1,000 spirit soldiers. They probably had some consciousness left, since they were outstanding high rankers. So they could only feel frustrated in the world of souls. Maybe they had fought each other inside. Of course, they wouldn't be able to affect each other physically. Yi and Wu waved his hand in the air. An ashy fog gathered and 2 spirit familiars appeared. Because they were highly ranked, they were able to evolve quickly with just a little bit of dark energy. This place is outside. Bahal and Leonte looked around after regaining their consciousness. Swoosh, shadows on the ground wrapped around them like vines so they couldn't move. It was the monster portents, who had been waiting beforehand. So the two couldn't move freely. Grunt, shit, what's all this? The two shouted after realizing what happened to this. They resisted as hard as they could, emitting vestiges as they did. Especially the fire sparking out from Bahal. It tried to burn the monster portents near him. Every time he resisted, the shadows were shaking up and down with him. They dare. These useless things dare. Yi and Wu clicked his tongue looking at the tired monster portents. As I expected, this isn't enough. He had been thinking something like this might happen. High rankers were people who were at the top of the tower. Their souls could only be as extraordinary. The reason why Yi and Wu had been able to get Bahal was because Bahal was tired, not because he was stronger than him. So obviously, the monster portents wouldn't be able to take care of him. The only reason why they were able to last thing long was because of the gap because spirit familiars and monster portents. If they went on like this, they would probably wear out. However, Yi and Wu wanted to check how strong Bahal was. And the result was worse than what he expected. It would be difficult to speak with him like this. Eventually, Yi and Wu flicked his finger once more, like it couldn't be helped. Then, all the monster portents in his collection were summoned. A larger number of shadows covered Bahal like a mummy. Ah, Cha Jung Wu, you dare to me, like this SSS. Bahal spit out his anger from the floor. It seemed like sparks would fly from his glowering eyes. But the terror in them from his death hadn't completely disappeared. What? Cha Jung Wu? Leonte, who hadn't seen Yi and Wu's face, looked at him in surprise. His vestige shook, like he didn't know what was going on. Looking at the confused guys, Yi and Wu slowly took off his mask. When they saw him, their faces filled with shock. Bahal became even more angry to forget the fear and Leonte hugged his trembling self. A light wheeze escaped his mouth. Yi and Wu accepted their confused vestiges. You guys. He spoke in a cold voice. Everything about the stone. The reason why Red Dragon attacked Cheongwado. You should tell me, without leaving anything out. Everything. How are you here? You should have died. Definitely. I definitely pierced a heart through your heart. Leonte started to mumble words because he was confused. He looked like he wanted to run away. But he couldn't move because of the shadows. Bahal was different. Suddenly, he stopped resisting. He knew too well that he couldn't escape, no matter how hard he tried to escape. Instead, he stared at Yi and Wu. He muttered like he figured something out. You look like Jung Wu, but you're not. Just who? Cough. But Bahal couldn't finish. The monster portents tightened around him so he couldn't breathe. Yi and Wu spoke coldly looking at them. I hope you don't misunderstand. The person asking questions now is me. Not you. All you have to do is answer my questions. Don't make me act. Bahal screamed while trying to resist. The hold of the shadows book is sturdier, and a blue fire wrapped around him. As the blue fire darkened, as holy fire burned, Bahal shook even harder from the pain. Holy fire had the completely opposite property compared to dark properties. So as the holy fire burned even brighter, Bahal felt like his body was being ripped in half with fire from hell. However, Leonte didn't scream like Bahal. His soul was already trembling, drenched in fear. Yian-Wu took back his holy fire when he thought he was somewhat calmed down now. And he asked again, "Tell me everything about the stone. And everything about Red Dragon." Ha, no. Seeing that Bahal was about to resist again, Yian-Wu flared up his holy fire again. This time, he increased the fire. The blue turned into yellow and ripped his soul. ACKK. Even someone with a strong mentality would become apathetic to continued pain. Also, although bodies could block off pain momentarily, souls couldn't. He had to taste the pain as it came. There wasn't any getting used to it. So when Bahal's energy was almost drained, he gave him dark energy again. He healed him, and tortured him again with holy fire. Please, I'll speak, so please. Stop, I said stop. Bahal couldn't resist any longer and surrendered. He didn't want to relive the painful experience of his soul ripping and being realigned again. But Yian-Wu didn't respond. He just quietly burned his holy fire and took it back, and continued the process, putting Bahal in hell. ACKK. Leonte wasn't able to meet Yian-Wu's eyes and tried to turn his head. But because of the shadows, he couldn't move at all. Yian-Wu walked towards the guy trembling in fear. Without saying anything, slowly. Leonte was the guy who planted the sword into his brother's heart. And the friend that his brother considered most dear. But the reply to his affection was betrayal. But Yian-Wu didn't ask why he did that. Why he made that choice. Why he betrayed his little brother. Why he crossed over to Cheongwado. Because it was obvious what the obvious would be. He would probably have an excuse, but he didn't want to know. All he wanted was for his brother to be comforted in the least. There was only one thing he wanted to know. I hope you know more than Bahal. It was everything about the stone. So, you're saying that the stone you made is called Stone of the Sage. Gt. So please, kill me. Yian-Wu sat on top of the ruined Leonte and organized his thoughts. He had received a lot of information from him. Stone of the Sage. To think that it actually existed. It was a magical device that any player who climbed the tower wanted. Without breaking, it infinitely supplied magic power, and accomplished miracles. There were a lot of rumors about the Stone of the Sage. To the point that even his brother mentioned them. But his brother had just spoken curtly about it. Stone of the Sage. If it existed, Alpharon would have already cleared the tower. It's nonsense. Other high rankers including his brother were firm in their beliefs that the stone didn't exist. There were only rumors about it. No one had actually seen it. If it existed, it would have already spread everywhere. Also, the trail endlessly gave trials to players, and led them to overcome them. If the stone really existed, everything would be useless. Even if it did exist, one could only hope for it on the 98th floor where gods and demons lived. It couldn't be found below the 77th floor. Also, it was thought that no one could make it. Even if that was the case, some people still took the chance and risked their lives for it. Alchemists, dark magicians, and other people tried to make the Stone of the Sage, or something that was similar to it. And of them, Leonte had been the closest. With additional information, a part of the hidden qualities is being uncovered. Opening square bracket ? Ed Stone of the Sage. Category. Rank. Summary. The purest form of energy in the world is a person's soul. This stone was created in the room the emerald tablet pointed to. It is not complete, sealed. This artifact is unique. Only one exists in the tower, and it is binded to its owner. It cannot be given to others. This is an incomplete artifact. Please complete the artifact. Then, you will be able to view the sealed information and options. Information about the stone was still hidden. But Yian-Wu knew that this was progress. It was only hard to catch a fish. After that, it became easier to handle it. Once he found a path, progress would be smooth. And I can borrow a part of the dragon knowledge if I need to. Yin Wu narrowed his eyes. He felt like he understood why Leonte had gone to such lengths to make this magical device. But he still had some questions. But how did you start to make this? You wouldn't have known about it. He was curious about where Leonte had received such high-class information. Others seemed to think it was possible with experimentation. But Yin Wu didn't agree. If this was an item that could be created with trial and error, Red Dragon would have made it already. No, even an alchemy clans and magicians clans would have been able to make it. But Leonte didn't have the ability to do that. He didn't have the skills or talents. Then just how had he made this? There's someone behind it, definitely. Yin Wu thought that someone had pushed Leonte into doing it. They controlled him behind his back, and would have tried to take the result. Of course, he was left empty-handed because of me. He's probably extremely regretting it right now. And Yin Wu thought that it might be someone he knew. And as expected, I stole. The emerald tablet. Emerald tablet, what's that? Yin Wu's eyes sparkled at the word he hadn't heard of before. What vi? Had. Viera Dune, core. Rect. Yin Wu laughed and clicked his tongue. You were played by a witch. The Witch of Stars, Viera Dune. She was the chief of the Walpurgisnacht clan. TN, web links. It wasn't counted in the 8 clans, but it was still strong. Also, she was a founding member of Arthea, as well as Jung Wu's lover. The world knew Viera Dune's face. Sometimes she made a man's heart beat with her youthful face. And other times, it was seductive, innocent, and helpful, luring at people. She was able to entrance people with her various faces. But her talent that wasn't known to the rest of the world, but the piece of temptation and awareness. His brother had realized too late that everyone had been played by her. Only after he was gone. The truth uncovered.